quickly go over our agenda for today, and we'll just, as people get here, we'll just fold them into the mix. So we are going to start the day today. Right behind this screen, Farah is waiting to talk to us. So she's all right.
Thank you.
Is that about the same height?
So she's going to talk about half an hour, some stuff about like matching grants. There were some questions about that, about like how to kick off, who to kick off talking with first, all of those for our fundraising stuff. So we'll talk about that first. Then our panel will be getting here. So after we're done with Farah, we're all going to turn around. These two tables on the end are going to move up to those two tables, and we'll face that way for the rest of the time with our panel. We're going to do that for about an hour, and then we're going to go into these small group discussions. So we have you guys broken up into 3 groups, and you'll have about 40 minutes in each group to talk in small groups with all of our expert guests today. We'll do a quick group debrief with our guests as well. And then we've got time to do your individual reflection, talk some logistics, do your survey, that kind of stuff. Then at the end, we're going to go into our groups again, our fundraising groups. Lots of people emailing, talking, texting me this past week being like, I need time with my group to talk about stuff. So we figured we'd do beginning and end talking about fundraising. So that is our agenda for today. And we will go right into Farah. Will you find Farah?
Yes. One of these tabs.
Okay.
I absolutely a sparkling water, a drug that was supply closet. And I
Okay. Thank
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Farah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So, how are you guys doing on a fine Cincinnati Saturday morning?
Cool. Thank you.
So I wanted just to kind of check in with you guys. Thank you. First off, answer any questions that might have come up after our last session, and then share your draft page right now as it stands, and kind of go over some of the components of it. And then again, answer any questions that you might have and give you some tips of starting to think about your prospect charts. So first off, any burning questions that bubbled up since the last time we chatted?
So I know Pam had a question about matching grants that you and I talked about, and IOB is all on top of. So if you could talk to the group about what that looks like.
Great, okay. So there are a couple of different ways that matches happen with IOB. The first one is if you engage a fairly large donor, and by large there's no specific dollar amount, it's whatever you constitute to be large. So sometimes a large donor could be $1,000, sometimes a large donor could be considered $500. But whatever the case may be, to leverage their donation to encourage others to also donate and receive matched dollars. So let's say, I'm going to say Colgate. I don't know why I'm picking this company, but it's early in the morning. But Colgate, you engage Colgate, and they said they'd give $1,000 to school board school. And you're like, oh, that's great. We want to leverage this $1,000 to get other people to donate to our campaign. So what would happen is we would set up an individual match for your campaign. That would be a $1,000 bucket. And it would say on the top of your campaign page, every donation made to school board school will be matched up to $1,000. So that means if someone gave you $5, then another $5 would come out of your $1,000 Colgate match pool. Does that make sense? Any other? I just wanted, because sometimes it's hard to just explain it, but that's kind of what would happen. You'd have like this large donation from an organization, entity, individual, whatever the case may be, and then now use it to leverage people who may want to make smaller donations or want to get their matches doubled, or their donations doubled. The other match program that IOB has is when IOB goes out and reaches out to foundations and other groups, and they give us like a large pool of money. Right now we have an art place match going on, and the pool of money is for $275,000, and they are matching individual artist projects for $15,000. So the two matches are ones that the group, you guys, School Board School, can go out and field on your own. And then there's other match programs that IOBI does the legwork, and then we get it for a specific pool of potentially crowdfunders. So those are the two kinds of matches. I don't know if that answers your question.
It doesn't.
Oh, what was the question?
I meant like an employer.
Okay. So yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so that the employer match. Yes, we do accept those. So if you made like a $10 or $50 match and your employer matches it,
Yes.
then you would have your employer donate to IOB, referencing School Board School's campaign page, and then it would be added to your campaign. The thing I would want to say is that employer matches take a long time for them to process on the employer side. So let's say you put in your request, and it's just historically what I've noticed. You put in your request that you want, you've donated $20 to School Board, and now you want your employer to match it. They usually take a few months before they issue that donation match, and then it takes a while because they issue it through a check, and it gets to us, or sometimes they might do it through an electronic funds transfer, but it won't be an automatic addition to your page. Like, so there'll be a delay because we have to wait to receive the funds from your employer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, I don't know if you guys have seen your drafted page, but I'm going to share it. Have you guys had a chance to check it out?
Yes.
Okay.
Just our digital natives. The digital natives have been hard at work, so they.
Yeah, it looks terrible. Don't show it. Don't show it.
It's a draft.
Terrible draft.
Terrible draft.
I just wanted everyone to see it, so that even though the digital natives are kind of the ones tasked to build it out or help, actually put it on the site, it's great to familiarize everyone in the group with it, because when you have your donors looking at the page, you can kind of let them know how to navigate it. But I will share it. Don't worry, it's not that bad.
I don't know if that's a compliment.
Alice,
This
you want that
is your
translated?
page.
It's fine.
It's drafted
fine.
form.
Oh.
And so it has some of the projects spelled out. Up on the right-hand side is the donation bar, and where people would donate to your project. Now there is some text here that's explaining the project and why you want to crowdfund. I usually encourage individuals to put the meat of their campaign right here. This is like the sweet spot, because that's where people really pay attention. As you ask them to scroll further, attention spans get less and less. So it's right, like this kind of area is where I would encourage you to put like your most dynamic and powerful messaging. At the top of the screen, you'll see, this is from the back end side, where individuals who would be editing it would see different options to select to edit the page and other things. But regular donor, or anyone who is not looking at it from the back end, will just kind of see this overview of the front page, and then the budget, and then other, this would be your budget tab, they would see that. Any updates that you guys posted, that would be there. And then donor list detail would be listed here, like all the donors that you guys have engaged. Now on the edit side of stuff, I'll share that with you too, because this is what the digital natives see. And this is where they plug in your tagline and things of that nature. The one suggestion that I'd like to make for the digital natives, I believe in the project budget or project story area, you guys have included sponsorship levels. Like right here, you see sponsorship levels. I don't know if everyone can see that. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so you'll see things about sponsorship levels, SBS Advocate, and different classifications for all the different levels. It'd probably be a great idea to include it in the extras section, because in the extra sections, we actually have built out the giving levels. So that would be just the first suggestion that I would make. And then also here, there's an opportunity to add up to 5 images and video, and that's where you put it. And I think, well, I will say that for the most part, I hate that people are visual. Overall, as a society, we're very visual, and the most striking visuals tend to get a lot of attention and positive feedback. So really think about what images you might want to include or what videos you might want to include in this eventual area. That's what it will look like. So I'll stop sharing because I'm sure the digital natives are probably cringing and thinking, like, why did you share that? But I just wanted everyone to kind of see the page. Are there any questions about that right now? Okay, so prospect charts. Who started on their prospect chart? Yay! Okay. So the prospect chart is really, I would encourage you to just, it's a powerful tool, and I can't stress enough how important it is, and it can just be a sheet of paper. So if, in the moments that you have today, if you have like a sheet of paper or on your notes app on your phone, start to list those individuals that you will start, so I guess reaching out to for donations, and then their potential ask amount. That would be the most important. If I give you a task to do, aside from building out the page, is definitely start to think about who you will be asking for donations from, and thinking about the story that you'll share with them. Personal stories are the most powerful, so you could probably start to share some of the experiences that you've had so far, and then use that as a way to kind of pull on the heartstrings. The other thing that I wanted to share, if there aren't any questions, is kind of like this weekly timeline that once your page is up, live, and running, there's like this suggested timeline that we give individuals to kind of follow. Of course, you can adjust the time because it's by a week-by-week basis. It's like week 1, you do this, week 2, you do this. So I wanted to just give you like a preview of it so that when I share it with Nicole and Elisa, you won't be foreign to you guys when you guys start to see it. But before I share the preview of the weekly plan, do you have any other? Because you guys are awfully quiet this morning.
I have a question. Sorry, I'm off screen, so I don't know why I'm raising my hand.
Sorry to see you.
No, you're fine. So my question, I was thinking a little bit about the visuals, the media, that sort of thing. How easy is it once the page is active to change it? Because one thing I'm thinking about, and I know that this is kind of complicated with media release and things like that, but I feel like the stuff that really, when it comes to education, the stuff that pulls at the heartstrings, the stuff with kids, right? So we're making school visits relatively soon, but I imagine that we'll need to kick off fundraising before that happens. So I guess, going back to my question, like how easy is it once the page is active to make changes if we find something that potentially is a little bit more striking, a little bit more engaging?
It's very easy.
Okay.
Very easy. I want to say very easy, and then also want to say relatively easy. The reason why I want to say both of those is there are some capacity constraints in terms of size of like files or images that the website can support. So if it's like a super dynamic video that is like 1,000 gigabytes, we probably cannot handle that. But in terms of just uploading basic videos and just high res images, definitely we can, and it's within seconds. So once you go into the edit function, you can swap out what you currently have with what you want to add now. And then the change will take effect as soon as you click Save Changes. One of the campaign pages that I would love to suggest that he did an awesome, he was actually a leader that I worked with personally. Matt is his name, and he did a campaign on bees, on saving bees, and Grand Staircase Escalante. I think I shared that as example of different pages that really stand out, because Matt definitely was on point with visuals and visual storytelling. And he's a filmmaker and a photographer, so he was able to make it work, and really, I would encourage you to check it out. Even his video, his opening video, is very powerful. So you might want to see some of the things that he was able to do in terms of just like visual quality, and then take it from there.
Cool.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
I can actually, I don't know if, yeah, because we have about 9 minutes, but if we do have time at the end, I will share a little bit of Matt's page, because I just thought it was just so good. But I wanted to do the preview of the plan. So I'm going to share my screen again. Give me a second. Okay. So this is kind of the, I'm sorry that I'm opening it up in the PDF format, but, or this editable kind of format, but here it kind of talks about the soft launch period. And this is kind of where most folks might want to just start sending out things on Facebook and Instagram, and no. Usually it kind of tells, we encourage you to go to those individuals who are closest to you. So these says go to your 10 closest supporters and and ask for donations. And then by week 2, the assumption is that you would have reached 25% of your goal. But that may not necessarily be the case. Sometimes it takes longer. And then it provides you with some steps and actions to take, and hyperlinks to kind of give you sample thank you emails. Sometimes individuals translate the thank you email to like a thank you post, where they will post on Facebook or Instagram, whether it be their personal handles or the org's handle. Thank you, Jacqueline Smith, for your contribution to School Board School. And that's a really great way to kind of get to build excitement and enthusiasm. So this is kind of like a templated way of kind of how to approach your campaign and breaking it up by week. And I will share that with Elisa and Nicole so that they can eventually share that with you. And then you can start to think about the strategy and who will be kind of, let's say, point person on the Building Urgency campaign when you start to do it in week 5. And then last chance. I've seen a couple of groups exercise this really, really well, but I truly encourage you to do it when you actually are very close to the finish line, because you don't want to give people the impression that you're always kind of like, we're almost there for like 12 weeks, So it's really best to kind of do it within like the last few days or but it's up to you. You know that you'll be engaging for your donors, but I've seen it most effective like within the last 48 hours to kind of get that last push. And then most importantly, the cultivating of relationships, just on a personal level and as well as on the level for the organization. Keeping those who have donated or considering donating constantly engaged with the work that you're doing is important as well, just to kind of keep people in the loop, because you never know when they'll be ready to contribute or to
Yeah, I have a question or two.
Sure.
When it says 20 or 30 people, and it says that like every week, is that for the whole organization, or is that like per individual? Because that's a pretty big network.
Yeah. So if you can decide how you want to do it, I would say 20 people per week per person. Because as you start to go into like campaign mode, you will network and interface with people that you are just, getting to know. And so you'll start off with the list of people that are your closest, that are probably in your phones right now. They're your contacts and people you've texted the last 20 times. So you can start with that list, but your network will expand. And this is encouraging you to have your network expand too. Think about those individuals that you haven't really shared what you've been doing. Of course, 20 could be a stretch goal for per individual, because some people probably are like, I'm not that social. I just I go home, or I don't really get out much, or what have you. But you can make your own personal goal of what your stretch goal is, but you should be adding on to your prospect chart along the way. It should not be stagnant.
Got it. The other one and maybe I missed it, but do you have any recommendations for kind of like best in class or things to think about, like for a pitch, for like the 2 minute version? Like, is it a combination of like what it is along with a personal story, or like what do you recommend?
In terms of framework, I can share some examples. Of course, definitely a story, a captivating story, a story that is easy to tell and that is quick, is a really good core component to have in a pitch. But I would almost want to say the most important thing with your elevator pitch, or however you engage donors, is that it's authentic and that it is your voice. Because people can tell when you're rehearsing something. So you kind of think about how you would communicate what this experience means to you and why you feel like it needs to continue. And in that, you will craft something that is in your own authentic voice that you can share. But there are a few templates that I could share that says, okay, start with this opening, and this is the meat, and then this is the closing. But if that doesn't sound like how you kind of move through the world, it's not going to be as effective as you want it to be.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
When can we start asking people to donate?
Okay, so this is, I guess, amongst as a group, you guys can determine when your page will be officially live. But I would start to kind of put the bug, personally, I would start to put the bug in the people that I know's ears, kind of like, oh, yeah, we're working on this project, and we definitely want your support, kind of just prime individuals now. But I wouldn't go in for like the hard kind of closing elevator pitch until your page is actually live.
Okay.
And that it can accept their
I've got donors.
All right.
We need to make it live.
And I think, so we were just talking about the end of the day-to-day, we save time also, so we're hoping the digital natives, since as you saw, they've kind of dumped all the information in, and now they need to just organize it. They have access to our Google folder of pictures. So I think the goal is by the end of the day today for them to have it looking good enough to launch.
Okay.
And then to Indy's question, we can keep making it more beautiful as we go, but for right now, our goal is by end of day today, we'll have something that we feel good launching, and then we'll send out to the whole class
Okay.
once it's all good. Yeah,
And
good question.
do folks?
Okay.
Yeah, one more question. Do folks know what the rules are as far as pictures and releases and things like that? Because I do think having a picture where there's like a school setting, and like I could probably do my own kids. I mean,
Right.
I'm probably
Yes,
safe there.
You cannot use anyone else's
Yeah, you
children.
cannot.
Yeah, like we obviously, you all know you signed a release, so we have that from you all. But unless you have releases from children as parents, like we can't use other people's kids. We likely have enough children in this room, children with school folks, that we can make some cute pictures. Yes, but.
But could we even use like the buildings in the background as a?
Yep. And we have some pictures too. That's great. We can always pull from last year some of our tours where like we're clearly in a building. You know, there's a couple different buildings that we've been in. So we have some of those too. If that's
okay.
Yeah, we can do. Yeah.
Okay, guys. Well, my time is up. It was great seeing you all on Saturday morning.
Thanks for joining us on
Thank
Saturday
you.
morning.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Sarah. All right. Okay, so good way to start a Saturday. Talking fundraising. All right, so what we're gonna do, so it's 9:30 now, and as you can see, our guests are starting to arrive. So oh, there's Tiana. Hey, Tiana. Good morning. Good morning. We're gonna shift for just a minute, so we're gonna take a couple minutes to let our guests get settled, let you guys shift. So the folks who are at these two tables, just move up to these two tables. You all, if you feel like you're a little far away from the group, feel free to like roll your chairs up or something, or stay here, whatever you'd like to do. Yes, but and then we are going to start up again at 9:45. So you know we always start on time. So if you want to take a little breather, back here 9:45. Everyone, so we are excited to get started this morning. We have, as you can see, a pretty fabulous group of people leading our learning today. So we start every session the same way, where we start with grounding ourselves in School Board School's vision and mission, so we can remind ourselves what we're doing here. So can one of our School Board School folks either read it from the front of your journal or from the screen? Can somebody nice and loud read our vision? Jessica, go for it.
When engaged citizens and aspiring school board members are empowered with the knowledge and skills they need to drive systemic change, every child will have the opportunity to succeed in school and beyond, and the entire community will be positively impacted.
All right, thanks, Jessica. How about our mission? Yes, Gay.
At School Board School, we are activating a diverse network of engaged citizens and aspiring school board members to create significant and sustainable change in their school system. We prepare participants with the skills, mindset, networks, and experience needed to be ready to serve as effective school board members and community advocates.
All right, thank you. And then once we talk big picture, what are we doing here? We always then talk about what are we doing here today. So what are our objectives for today's session? So again, you all can flip to chapter 7 in your journals if you'd like, or read it from the screen. Can we have someone read those nice and loudly for us? Yeah, Marcia.
So, our objectives. Classmates will be introduced to some of the major issues in education that are facing our country and our district. See how major issues in education are and are not being addressed in our city and in other districts and regions. Believe that student achievement depends on strong leadership by the board and superintendent. Believe that both the board and administration are responsible for student achievement and must have a shared understanding about the roles of governance, management, in moving student achievement.
All right, thank you. So then from there, we always take it down one more level where each of our classmates here are coming up with their own personal vision for impact statements. So what specific impact they want to make in the seat they want to make it from. And over time, those have been evolving, but we always reflect on them at the beginning and end of every session so we can think about what we want to do with everything we're learning. So I know y'all have written it down a bunch of times now, or typed it up. Our digital friend, Alex. So why don't we have everybody just turn to a neighbor at your table and share with them your personal vision for impact, reminding yourself why are you here personally today. So go for it. We'll take about 2 minutes to do that. All right, and then while they're doing that, I'll tell you all, we record every session. We don't ever share anything, and make up the content for today. Thank you. Thank you.
About like the announcement, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's Paul Bryan, that's.
Oh, I must have missed it because I'm like.
Right, and let your partner share theirs if your partner
Now I'm
hasn't
gonna
shared
go back
theirs
to my
yet.
message and see if I got. I'm gonna feel like really special. And I'm gonna tell myself it's intentional. I'm part of the Inspire. Okay. Congratulations,
All right, let's bring our attention back to the front again. All right, thank you, thank you. I know it's kind of funny that we have our like screen at one end and then our people at the other end, but we are all just doing our best. So let's quickly go over our agenda just so everybody's aligned with what we want to get done today. So we're going to spend about the next hour in our panel conversation. Audrey is our moderator for this panel, so she's going to be leading the conversation with the group today. She has prepared some questions, so I'm just going to ask you all to not ask questions during the panel. The panel is a time to get a high-level overview of what all these folks are working on. So what are they doing? Why are they doing that? How are they doing it high level? And then you're going to have a chance to ask lots of questions in our small groups. So I'm sure things are going to come up, right? Questions are going to come up in your head during the panel. That's why you have your journals. Jot down all those questions so you can make sure you do get them answered, and you'll get them answered in the small group conversations. So after our panel, we'll break into 3 small groups. So we'll have one group over here of our local experts. So that's Audrey, Tiana, and Brian. And then we'll have another group over in the far corner there of our national experts, Marisa and Sonia. And then our teacher recruitment prep retention group is going to be in the next room over. So we got lots of good space so we don't kind of have to yell over each other when we're having those conversations. So that's what we'll do there. In between the second and the third rotation, we'll break for lunch. And that's a great time. I know you all kind of submitted who you really wanted a chance to kind of get to know. So Nicole set up some lunch tables. So that's just a really nice casual time for you all to get to know these folks, for them to get to know you. You can hear more about just like even their personal journeys, like what brought them to this work, what were they doing before this, why do they, all of that kind of more, just like a personal time to get to know them and to get to know you. And then together we'll do a group debrief. So kind of what came up for you today, what did you learn, those kind of things. And then we will say thank you to our guests, and you all will have a chance to do all of the stuff we usually do, our wrap up, logistics, reflection, quiet reflection time, all that good stuff. So that is our plan for today. These are a very good looking group. And so I will turn it over to Audrey from here to lead our panel conversation.
Hi everybody, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Audrey Treasure. I know you have my bio. I used to be at the Cincinnati Business Committee before this work, where the business community there has really been involved in education in the region for over 40 years. I've moved now to the chamber, and while I'm not directly working with the education system, what I am trying to do is work with companies and how they recruit and retain their workforce, and think about the pipeline of how we get people from the district into great jobs, how we get those parents who are currently not in great jobs into better jobs, and how we make companies a part of the solution for some of those things. So I'm excited to be back here today geeking out on education issues. And one of the things that I think is really great is that for all of you in the room who've committed your lives to the school board school process right now, and whatever other ways you might be working in education, and all of the people here on the panel, what I think is really phenomenal is that each one of us has a commitment to young people and the belief that young people can do amazing things. And we're invested in doing better for them so that not only they can thrive now as part of our education system, but can also then thrive and lead the lives that they want to lead. So even thinking about that actually kind of makes me tear up, because it's really important work. So thank you all for doing this, and thank you all for being here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna start by, this is kind of a big panel, and this is a really big topic that could be really unwieldy. So we're going to ask for concise points from our panelists to give everybody a chance to speak. And we're going to start by having each one of you introduce yourself and give big picture what it is that you focus on in your day. So, Tiana, you're here. You can begin.
Good morning. I'm Tiana Amat, Deputy Superintendent. I've been with CPS 8 years, born and raised in Brooklyn. Most of my experience have been in urban settings, but I've also, before coming here, I was a curriculum coordinator with Lakota. My current work consists of teaching and learning. I have 4 departments: curriculum, testing, performance and accountability, and early childhood. Along with, which is a new position, I manage the directors of school leaders, which are 4 directors that supervise and coach principals. So basically I have also all 65 schools. And I'm making that transition this year. So that's just a different structure.
Thank you. Brian.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brian Neal. I'm the CEO of Accelerate Great Schools. So the premise of my organization is that we invest in high-quality schools for all families, all children, regardless of what neighborhood you live in and your social economic status. I've been in this work in this current position for about 2.5 years, but prior to that, I think I've spent about 15 years in education with folks like Julie and Laura and Mary Rowland on just high-level things. I worked as one of the first founding resource coordinators of Cincinnati Public Schools. Really excited about the work I took on there in Winton Terrace, working with families and the school leadership there. And then from there, I took on some roles with United Way, and then also working directly with families to promote education opportunities across the state. So really excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Marisa Rowley. It rhymes with Elisa. You got my name wrong, and that's okay. I work with Mayerson Academy. I am a senior program manager. Mayerson Academy does a lot of different things, but my particular role at Mayerson Academy is working on social emotional learning in the K-12 sector. So I work out here locally with CPS, but I also do work across Ohio, nationally and internationally. I'm excited to talk more about you.
Hi everybody, I'm Sonia Forg. I am Director of Development for Braven, which is a national nonprofit that works in higher ed to support first generation, low income, and students of color transition from college to strong first jobs. And so Audrey talking about the workforce gets me really excited. And so Braven actually runs a semester-long career course at large public universities across the country. We are not in Cincinnati currently. Someday, it's on my plan, whether it's on our CEO's plan or not. Well, I'm working on it. But I lead our development wing and also co-lead our communications and marketing work to ensure that we are sharing the issue of job inequity that exists for college grads, and then also ensuring that we have the resources to serve thousands of students across the country.
And I am Julie Sellers, and I am the president of the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. I have been in CPS for 30 years, but I do have 39 years of educational experience because I served on the board of my children's preschool 39 years ago. So I started early, and I have been involved with education my entire life. I am in my 6th elected term, and we work on making sure that teachers have what they need so that they can be successful in the classroom, because a teacher's teaching condition is a student's learning condition, and we want to make sure that class sizes are in compliance, because we know that class sizes that are too large are not fair to every child because they don't have as much one-on-one time with the teacher. We also are now working very closely with the district, and we have, I have someone on my staff who is in a hybrid position. They're paid for by CFT and the district, making sure that there's a positive school plan in every school and making sure those structures are in place as we transition over to more restorative types of practices. So it's busy every day. But every day I think that we're making gains for teachers and students in CPS.
Great. I'm Leah Chamberlain, and I work at UC in CECH, which is the college that houses our School of Education at UC.
In my role there as Director of Academic Services, and I wear many hats in that role, but I'm liaison to the Ohio Department of Higher Education and the Ohio Department of Education on issues related to teacher education. I also serve on our State University Education Deans Group, which is a group of deans and administrators from the 13 public universities in Ohio that works closely with legislators and state administrators on, again, issues related to teacher ed. And then I work with our program faculty on teacher ed curriculum, program approval, accreditation, and also supervise our advisors who advise our teacher ed candidates.
It's great to meet you all. Good morning. My name is Ben Lindy. My normal job is that I'm the Executive Director of Teach for America here in Cincinnati. I'm on leave from Teach for America to run for Public School Board here in Cincinnati. So I have great respect for the work you all are doing and the change you're trying to make in Elisa's leadership and this great group of people. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you all. So I think you know that we're going to talk about a lot of things that are controversial. It's kind of exciting. And we hope that you'll keep an open mind and consider all these different perspectives of the folks who have been brought to the table. And I'm sure we'll all learn a lot. I've taken a lot of notes, and so I'm glad you don't get to ask any questions yet because I have a lot. And then you can ask your questions later. So this is, I would like this to be a rapid fire round. And so I'd like each one of you to give us what your top one, I'll let you do two if it is fast, what the two biggest issues you think in K-12 education are right now. Starting with Ben.
Awesome. Principal quality.
Principal quality. Great. Social emotional learning and diversifying the teacher pipeline. Great. Sorry. Because I said two.
Social emotional learning, principal and teacher quality and development.
Diverse teacher pipeline. Time and resources for social emotional learning.
Access to high quality for all kids regardless of where they live.
Principal quality.
Wow, yeah. So let's dig in. Okay, so several people mentioned teacher and principal quality, and I've got some questions specific to our folks in the teacher pipeline area. So Leah and Julie, I would love your thoughts on, if we're focused on teacher quality specifically, why aren't more people entering the teaching profession right now?
Do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go. I think it really comes back to how we view teaching as a profession in our society. So there's a recent survey that came out, a national survey that says higher than ever, students or parents would not want their students to be teachers, and that includes parents who are teachers themselves. They don't want their kids to be teachers. And teaching, I think, has a really bad rap in terms of the issues teachers have to deal with. They're overworked, they're stressed out, they don't make money. So I think we focused really hard on the negative issues. Even those of us working to better the issue, we focus on the negatives, which diminishes interest in the profession. And I think we need to get better at telling the positive stories of teaching and working on those conditions, of course. Great. Thank you. Julie?
I think that the reason people are not choosing to go into education like they used to, and it was like their goal to become a teacher in life, and especially teachers' children, because teaching was usually a family type of career. Like, my mother was a teacher, of course I'm going to be a teacher, and it's almost like in your blood. And now teachers are saying to their children, their sons and their daughters, do not go into teaching because of the way you are going to be treated. The respect has not been there. I mean, we have seen it for the last 10 or 12 years of it's the teacher's fault. And every society problem that is going on, it's because of the teachers. And there's been so much teacher bashing going on. And I think that pendulum is now swinging in the opposite direction. It went way far right, and I think now it's maybe starting to come back to the center. Most of you probably remember Time Magazine when Michelle Reese said, sweep out all the bad teachers. And that national agenda seemed to sweep across the country. It was every cause that teachers had was it was because they weren't of the highest quality. I also think that teachers, since the Great Recession, their teaching has had, school districts have been robbed of resources. There's less funding now than prior to the recession. So teachers have had to do more with less. And it makes it difficult. And now everybody wants everything done immediately because of all of the technology. And teachers are like, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I can go anywhere else and make more money. My own daughter is a teacher in this district, and she says it all the time. As soon as I get my student loans paid off, I'm leaving this profession. And it breaks my heart to know that how much she has put into being a teacher, but yet she's willing to just walk away from it. And it's because they're not getting the resources they need to do the job. They're not getting the professional development that they need to do the job at the quality they want. I would say 95% of teachers are perfectionists and they are overworked. But every time you have to do something, you're expected to do something without the resources to do those things, you back away. And it ends up having a negative impact, I think, on the psyche of those teachers, and they're just like, I'm done, I'm out of here. Teachers, last night we had a big teacher party. We always have it on the last Friday of the first quarter. There are more teachers who are there who are not ready for retirement. They're at 25 years. They're like, we didn't get this, we weren't trained for that, we're expected to do this. They're like, this is going to be my last year and I don't even care. And they're walking away from their pensions, they're walking away from their careers, and they're doing it for their own mental health. And then there's pressures from parents. Parents have this belief that they can call and talk to their teachers at any given time, 24/7. And that they're going to get a response. There are literally teachers, because we have this Power School program where people enter their grades. Teachers start getting emails and phone calls at 10:30 in the morning when they've given a test at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so it's like, I'm teaching and I don't have time to grade I'm with your child. I'm not sitting down grading the test. Like, where do they think the children go when the test is over? I mean, elementary teachers have children from the minute they walk in the door to the minute they leave. They have children all day long. There are not transitions between bells. And so there's this unrealistic attitude that if you're not on call to parents and they send long emails about everything, and you can't keep up with it all. So they have so many different platforms that they have to keep up with. They're like, what is the main one I should be focusing on? What is the main initiative I should be focusing on? Because I can't do 10, I can't do 20 different things and still have time to prepare for my classes to make sure I have engaging lessons for students. And so I think it's just the frustration that people see. I know there are kids, I used to say, I know you would be a great teacher to students, and they're like, I'm not going to do this job, look at this. I'm like, I mean, if students are thinking that, what are you thinking that people going into college? So
I have a question about that.
But one quick thing. I think that what we need to do and what we used to do, we had a great pipeline, and we identified students in their junior and senior year, and they started working with universities, and they were in cohorts. We cannot wait for students in high school to go to college and for them to graduate and wait for them. We need to start working and recruiting those families and students in high school so that they go into the profession, but we must also support them when they do go into the profession.
So you answered one of my questions, which was how can we build pathways for students to consider going into education? So thank you for that perspective. Leah, is there anything on that might be complementary to what Julie said?
We're thinking about similar things. We know there's a lot of schools in the Cincinnati area that have teacher academies, so students in high school that are taking a class as they're thinking about the teaching profession, but we notice that a lot of those academies are located in our more affluent and less diverse districts, and they come do college visits on campus, take a class, interact with us, and so UC is working really hard to partner with more diverse districts that might not have the resources to start teacher academies on their own. So we're working with Princeton and Winton Woods and hopefully CPS to start teacher academies in a broader range of schools.
Okay, great. One of you mentioned that a diverse teacher pipeline was important. And Ben, I know you had some experience with that through Teach for America. Teach for America has been very intentional around recruiting diverse individuals to come into the teaching profession. Can you speak about some things that you and the organization has learned as a whole of that, and describe even what some of those initiatives might have been?
Yeah, so I'm going to make an assumption that people are familiar with Teach for America. Helpful for me to give nope, not familiar. I'll give a short, great. Teach for America is an organization that cares about all kids having access to a great public education. And sees that issue as a systemic issue. It's multiple causes. It's going to take real systems change to make a difference for it. And so what Teach for America tries to do is recruit really talented, diverse, bright, committed young people, not only young people, but often young people, who want to take that on as their life's work. And that starts with a minimum 2-year teaching commitment in the classroom, which then forms the basis for some way that they want to attack that systemic problem in their career. Many people remain teachers, some people become principals, some people like Elisa, like myself, decide to run for school board, but to find some way to address some part of that systemic problem. And as part of that, I think it's crucial that those leaders be diverse like America is diverse. So that means two things. I mean, at first, I think it means folks who share the racial and socioeconomic background of kids. That's important because I think there's such an opportunity for impact when kids can see themselves reflected in the teaching force. But it also means diversity in a different way, which is representing all of America. Because if this is a systemic problem and you want to move systems, you need broad and diverse coalitions of people. So that means we need to reach every dinner table in America. So we care about both kinds of diversity. What we've found takes extra effort is recruiting people of color and people from a low-income background into teaching for all kinds of reasons. And the things we've found most successful is very targeted recruitment in a one-on-one fashion of people who are in college. Our approach, I don't think this is the only approach, I think this is an approach where we have had some success, is by being as aggressive with top juniors and seniors in college as any private sector firm would be. If Procter & Gamble is trying to get the top seniors at UC to apply to their marketing program, why shouldn't the top seniors at UC also be applying to care about education for their life's work? And so we try to figure out who those people are, what they care about, who they listen to, how we can get some time with them, how they can hear from other people who have either come from a similar background or had a future career trajectory that they like, to see through teaching, whether that's Teach for America or somewhere else, a way to have the kind of career that they'd like to have. Is that detailed enough? Like, I'm happy to, okay.
I know all of you would like to talk longer. Thank you. And one of the other things that some of you mentioned was social emotional learning, but even while Julie was talking about the way that teachers and schools are expected to do everything, one of those new things, I think, is social emotional learning, that now we also want schools to make sure that our kids are competent and thriving in that. So Marisa, are there some things about social emotional learning and perhaps how they relate to what we're also asking our schools to do that you might share with us?
Yeah, I think in my time at Marison, I've been there for about 2.5 years. Previous to that, I was in the classroom and I supported new teachers, so about 12 or 13 years in direct service to schools. I found that as you talk to teachers about social emotional learning and really helping students think about how they advocate for themselves, how do they manage their emotions, how do they build relationships with one another. I've never found a teacher or anyone at the school level who ever says this is not what my kids need, but it's always that same case of how am I supposed to fit it in? Or how can I find the resources to get the professional development for my school so that I feel well versed in what social emotional learning is. We're hoping that the state just came out with a new strategic plan that is focused on social emotional learning as one of the top four priority areas that hopefully as it delineates down to the districts, schools and teachers will have more access to social emotional learning. The great thing here locally is that CPS is ahead of the curve ever since they initiated their advisory programming into CPS. Social emotional learning has been a cornerstone of that, but when I look across the nation, it is still up and coming in lots of other regions. It's also really hard to see that internationally, because we do a lot of work internationally with social emotional learning, is that very high affluent private schools in the world are really focused on social emotional learning, and you're not seeing that same type of equity even here locally. We went to a national conference, maybe a year after I'd been on staff, and when I was looking to connect with other teachers and other educators within systems, around the United States, there were probably less than 10 educators in America who were focused on social emotional learning at a conference that was rooted in positive psychology. And if you know anything about particularly social emotional learning, it's really connected to positive psychology, and that's how you focus on it. But there was, anywhere you turn, there were educators internationally who were focusing on social and emotional learning. And we think about what students in America are facing. It's a need, regardless of where you are in the belief system, where you are politically, it's a thing that all students need. And to not be able to, I mean, there's only so much time that you also have to focus on math and reading to get kids ready for the workforce. You only have so much time to do professional development to make sure that teachers are ready. And so when the pie gets cut, that's the hardest thing is how do you get the thing that you know both teachers and students need.
Thank you. And so Tiana described her responsibilities, which span not only the content that students are learning with the curriculum, but then at the highest level, the principal of each school that is implementing that work. So from social emotional to the actual academics. Can you speak to how you manage and lead and both in, you mentioned principal quality, how do you even get people who've been teachers to consider them taking on another additional responsibility?
The research is clear, regardless of a student's background, economic status, race, teachers are the #1 impact on student achievement. That is it. And so we have invested in teachers, but with our new superintendent, we talked about who has the #1 impact on teachers. Mm-hmm. It's principals. Mm-hmm. So that's why we did this restructuring and having directors of school leaders. They create the culture to get it done. And there's also a shortage of principals. So they're not even going into teaching. It is very difficult to find principals. So we are developing a principal pipeline. I don't know if you're familiar with the Wallace Foundation. They have done over 12 years of research on principal pipeline, and there's 7 domains. So we have a cross-functional group working with talent development, curriculum, HR, and our goal at the end of this year is to have an action plan on how are we going to support our principals in order to create these wonderful environments. And it is a partnership with our community, our parents, our teachers, our classified staff, our civil service staff. Everyone matters in a school. And I think the development, as a teacher, you typically work as an individual contributor. I have my class of 30. I'm working with my students. But as a principal, you have to figure out how to lead with people who have different agendas, different ideas of how to increase student achievement. Or what, I was the former principal of Hyde Park, and our big thing is Happy Hyde Park School. Well, talking about the social and emotional, what is happy? You know, and different ways of getting there. So that's where my work and my energy, and I really think this shift, because for years, the thought was principals were managers. You have your supplies, you have your resources, yeah, you're good, and they're off. They're doing lunch duties. It's bigger than that. The research shows that principals are a strategic strategy in improving student achievement. So we want to invest in our principals and to be able to hold on to our teachers, to be able to recruit our teachers. So that's kind of where we are, and I think that is the #1 area that I'm focusing on in my role as deputy, because it is systemic and it's not a Band-Aid approach, and we have to look at different areas from understanding pedagogy to understanding how to inspire others, understanding the politics and going to community council meetings, understanding how to engage parents in a variety of ways, understanding kids and equity, and all kids will have access. And how do I do that? Understanding, the list goes on. And I think if we really develop our principles, we will get there.
That's great. To build upon that, so CPS, somebody can correct me if my numbers are wrong. CPS is a district of 37,000 students.
Close.
Of a pool of 55,000 potential students. So there are 18,000 other students who are not choosing CPS for a variety of reasons. Brian is working at Accelerate Great Schools to represent all of those young people, in theory, right?
That's correct.
So in the public school system, in the private parochial system, in other private schools, and then in public charter schools. So could you speak about how, when you think about these big issues in education and trying to serve the needs of students and families who want choices, how does that inform the work that you're doing at AGS?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start off by saying that most of my work is informed by my personal experience, right? So I'm a father of 4. My oldest daughter graduated the School of Performing Arts and CPS. She's doing exceptionally well. My middle 2 daughter and then my nephew I'm raising graduated Fairfield Public Schools, did exceptionally well. My youngest goes to Summit Country Day, right? I, as a parent, my wife and I were able to look at our students' learning styles and figure out where the best opportunities were for each of them. We just believe that every parent should be able to make the same call for their child, point blank, right? So it gets controversial when you talk about different governance structures or different models. That's not our concern. Our concern is that when we talk to over 1,000 parents and they start telling us about what their needs are and what their concerns are and then what their issues are, that we go out and we find those resources to help them. So that's what we do as an organization. So we've made phenomenal program investments with CPS and the Spencer School and the Talent Investment Grant, and so we're really excited about that, and even Walnut Hills. So those are great programs where there are great things happening for our young people. We just want to make sure that more children from diverse backgrounds have that access. And similarly, we've invested in a charter school that's launched in Bond Hill that's doing very well. The founder is from Cincinnati, graduated Walnut Hills, went away to New York, did some really great things in independent schools, went to Chicago, was successful there, and is coming back because her mom's a 30-year retired principal from CPS, and she wants to come home and serve kids where her mom lives, right? Great, we make investments there. In the parochial sector, right? Who am I to tell a parent that they should not send their kid to a Catholic school? That's not my call. So we get parents who call us and ask us, how can you help invest in the parochial school system? We believe that Catholic education is core and central to what we want to do with our children, with our families. So can you help us? So we make investments in that area as well. So that's the premise of Accelerate Great Schools. As a funder, we provide resources to those programs that are working. We do not run programs. We do not push people to make specific changes in their programs. We allow people to come to us, talk about what's working, from educators to the parents, and then we make investments accordingly.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Sonia, then you're talking about people after they've gone through the places that touch all of the other folks here. In the work that you're doing in higher ed, particularly for people who are minority students or from low socioeconomic backgrounds, what are the things that you're identifying that young people need now that they maybe should have had as a part of their K-12 experience, and then as they move on into the workforce?
Yeah, so I don't know that there's things that they should have had in their K-12 experience, but what I will say is that it doesn't stop at 12th grade, and so when we have more and more students that are going to universities, and we work with 4-year public universities, students, that the things that they need, they still need a network of supporters. They still need help identifying what is the pathway, how do I navigate this next 4 years? And so when we're working with our students, which we typically work with sophomores or transfer juniors, so a lot of our students actually go to community colleges first and have transferred into a public university, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what's my career path, who am I, how do I tell my story, also how do I get the resources I need to be able to put my best foot forward while I'm also working 3 jobs, a full school load. And so that's why we decided to embed Braven into actual credit. So students get 3 credit hours through taking our course. We're in partnership fully with the universities so that they don't have to take time when they would be doing their work study or they would be doing their jobs to support their family at home to gain the career skills, networks, and experiences they need to land a strong job. And so what I would say is that we have to start thinking about education as pre-K through 16 to ensure that our students not only get to college but persist through college and land that strong job. Because If they don't, the risk is too high. So we know that for an African American college graduate with a BA is 2 times more likely to be unemployed than their white counterparts. When we think about low-income graduates, they make 66 cents on the dollar to their higher income peers. And so this issue is real, and just getting to college is not enough. And so actually I think we need both the corporate sector to come in and to help build the networks and recognize and identify the people that you were talking about.
You're giving me work to do.
Yeah, and we need higher ed because we have great career service offices at our colleges, but when you think about a public university that serves 40,000 students, and you think about the number of students on Pell Grants that are there, they're actually not possible to serve thousands of students with 8 employees in a career service office. And they will tell you that too. So we work in partnership with them to provide something that gives our students the tools to land those strong jobs. And I would say networks. And so you're 9 times more likely to get the job with a referral. And so we have to help students who don't have the networks of the CEO or the uncle, the rich uncle that has a connection to get you that summer internship, build those networks. Yeah. And we can do that earlier, but let's just keep doing it in college.
Yes, absolutely. So I wanted to ask, I think related, but maybe not as much as I'd like, question to Tiane. So as you're thinking about the 37,000 kids in the district who you want to go get jobs, now not everyone's going to go to college. How are you planning around enabling the strongest student achievement possible from your seat in central office?
A strong tier 1 curriculum. I think I'm going to go a little personal with how my career went. As I stated before, most of my experience had been in urban, starting out in Brooklyn, and I really believe in research-based practices. So I did these strategies, it worked, it was great, and then I decided to go to the suburbs and try those same strategies out. It worked. Good instruction is good instruction. So when leaving Lakota, my colleagues was like, why are you going to be a principal again? Because I was a principal in Princeton. You start to get a reputation and I was ESL, Black, and poor, increasing achievement. So let me go to one of the richest areas in CPS and do the same strategies at Hyde Park. Did it, became the #1 school in the state. Same strategies I did in Brooklyn, same strategies I did in Princeton, same strategies I did in Rockdale, Good instruction is good instruction. So all kids need to have access to grade level instruction. The research is clear. I think what we have done is remediate to death. We have loved students literally to death. The expectations are low. So I believe in the wraparound services, but I do think it does something to the psyche. If I have to feed you breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm giving you medication. I think all that is great, but we have to have a discussion of why. And why do we have to do that? It has nothing to do with that individual based on how this country was founded. So we have the haves and have-nots. But I think those who want to give and make a difference, it does something with, are you really able to do this work? So leading curriculum, teaching and learning is also touching on all kids can do it. They are brilliant. I speak a lot to teachers around asset base, what kids are bringing, not deficit. And I think that is very difficult when you're working in an urban environment. So our teachers have to believe, our parents have to believe, and our students, and to really invest in that. Because the research is clear on best practices and materials to use, but this is a connection. So really working with our teachers, and we're doing something now with really promoting, working with CFT around shared leadership. that we have to come together. Who are our teacher leaders in the building to work with the principals so they can deliver this asset-based message to each other and how we can get this done. And it's very difficult, hard work, but we have to stop with the remediation and just say all of our kids deserve grade level, rigorous curriculum and deliver it.
Thank you. Ben, so Teach for America has a focus, and Julie, I'm going to ask you about it in a minute. So, Ben, Teach for America has a focus of its teachers demonstrating the progress they're able to achieve within an academic year that I think differs some from what other districts might mandate of their own students. Can you speak to how Teach for America has put an emphasis on, to the point that Tiana's just made, the belief that all children can thrive and achieve if they're given the right circumstances?
Yeah, and I think this is something that we've tried really hard to do and get better at Teach for America, and I think other teachers and schools are doing some similar things that we've even learned from too. But for us, I think, you know, for a teacher to be a good teacher, we need to have evidence that the students are learning. And if a group like Teach for America is going to work predominantly in low-income kids, where kids are coming in several grade levels behind, we want them to learn more in a given year than would take place in a different classroom, because what we're trying to do is help close opportunity gaps for kids. And I think, you know, it's two things can be true at once. I think that it's important that teachers try to do that with kids because kids deserve it. And I think at the same time we can be honest about the fact that it's going to take much, much more than one great teacher or two great teachers or three great teachers to get kids everything that they need. And that's why we have this approach of it being a systemic problem and wanting to have folks go take on parts of that even outside the classroom too. But to your question, I think for us this is about data and about finding strong, rigorous ways of measuring where do kids enter the classroom. At the end of the year, how far did they get? And something in the middle that tells us, are we on track to make more than what would typically happen in a given school year happen? And it's tricky. Audrey, if I'm going off your question, will you tell me? Okay.
I mean, you guys doing what you want.
It's been happening all over the place up here.
Yeah, I think I want to acknowledge the challenge we're having in education right now, which is around over-testing, because I think that's real, you know, and it's I think like so many issues in education, like there's just a lot of gray, and I don't think there are very often black and white answers to things, because I'm someone who really believes that some testing matters crucially, because it's how we're honest about whether or not we're delivering for kids and families what we say we're going to deliver. And it lets us tell a story, an accurate story about where kids have access to extraordinary opportunities and where they don't. And sometimes that tracks race in class and sometimes it doesn't. And we learn interesting things that we didn't think that we knew before. We all get better together. And so we're in this environment where sometimes states have testing requirements and districts have testing requirements, and then individual schools have their own testing requirements, and it can become a mess where the total number of instructional days you're really losing because there's so much testing on. I think that testing comes from a good place, because I do think we need to be able to know whether or not our kids are learning, how much, whether that's distributed equitably, and where we can learn from. But I think something that I think everybody is trying to figure out is how do you do the crucially important parts of that without having so many different tests going that all kids are doing, you know, is taking tests all day. Because I think that's not good for kids. That's not what I want my 4-year-old or 2-year-old to be doing in their classroom. But I do think I'm not someone who's willing to throw all of it out because I think there are parts of that are really crucial.
Thank you. So Julie, you represent, I think, 2,300 teachers?
About 2,800.
Okay. And so how do you...
Almost 3,000 because we also represent the clerical workers.
Oh, that's right. So when thinking of those individuals, and we know how important a teacher is to the classroom, how does CFT then measure teachers who are successful or even promote their ability to continue to be successful in their workplace with their students?
One of the things that we look at is, well, I'm sure all of you saw a bunch of teachers coming in from the parking lot. AFT has a professional development catalog of courses, and we give coursework, professional development to our teacher members for free, and it's on different topics because we believe that every teacher should have access to quality professional development in content areas. So there is one class here of, I think, about 30 teachers who've given up their Saturday. It's one Saturday a month. They're here from 8:30 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon on their time because they want to learn strategies that they can use in the classroom. One of the courses that they have is on thinking math, which ties in with the math curriculum of the state of Ohio, because if a teacher doesn't have those strong strategies in the content area and have the background, they're not going to be able to deliver curriculum at the level that they need to deliver. Then we also have another cohort of teachers on managing behaviors and its strategies to make sure that teachers know how to build a strong culture within their building or within their classroom, because we know that the more engaged students are, the more they're going to learn. So we have been doing this for several years. We have a teacher leadership program where teachers do action research projects, and it's a year-long program that they come up with something where they measure what's going on in their classroom, and they know that policy impacts the classroom. And that is sometimes difficult for teachers to understand. Mm-hmm. And so they look at either a local, a state, or a national policy, and they say, how is this impacting me in my classroom? And they collect the data, they look at what's going on within their building, they reach out sometimes to other teachers at other grade levels in other buildings so that they have more data, and they say, this isn't working and this is why it isn't working. And we have been able to use that information when we lobby legislators to make some changes, when we are sometimes they've presented at school board meetings, so they have a better understanding of that. It gives teachers a voice, and this program was developed in New York City, and CFT's been doing it, I think, 8 years, because there was a woman in New York who was appalled. She did not work for the school district, but she was an educational policy wonk. And do you remember when they used to have Education Nation, and it was like the whole weekend focus, and they had people from all over the country presenting? So the whole conference was on education in America, and they did not have one teacher on one panel who was talking about education in America. So they developed this program so that teachers could have a better understanding of educational policy and how it impacts them, so that there is a strong teacher voice. Because too many times policy is being written by people who have never been in a classroom. There's too many times that policy is at the state level, they are voting in policy and they don't even understand the unintended consequences of what it is and how it's going to impact our students. The report card is the perfect example. Chiefs of Change came up with the A to F report card. I'm sure every person in this room thinks that a graduation rate that is failing is probably under a 60. Well, CPS for the 5-year graduation rate was 79.6%. That's an F. A D is an 80. I don't know anyone, when I talk to people about those types of policies, they are appalled. So the failing school message was created to have failing schools. And it impacts children, it impacts property values, it impacts districts.
So
But
can I ask
who would
Brian
think
to weigh
that?
in on some of this? Because
Okay.
Brian,
Okay.
Yeah.
in Brian's work at AGS, I'd love if you had a comment back to what Julie's saying, but then also because you say you're interested in proven models that work. So to Ben's point, if we're using tests as the proven models,
Yeah.
and yet there were flaws, what thoughts
Yeah.
do you have on both of those?
Yeah, so I get the question a lot, what are great schools? How do you define great schools? How do you measure great schools? And the responses come from the parent level as, if a school welcomes my child, it's great, right? And that's good, right? Parents feel a sense of connection, so that's great. I get response from the other end. If the school is an A only on a state report card, it's a great school. So somewhere in there we have to figure out like what's the right mix. And so what we look at is how's the school performing in their community against the kids who are there? Are the kids growing? Are they learning? Are they having success? Is there strong leadership within the school? And so we look at a whole host of metrics. We don't just do it in a vacuum where we say if you're an A or B only, we're going to fund your school. That's not how we operate, right? So we look at a whole host of conditions that go into this. Now on the policy side, I totally agree, right? There's a lot of things that happen at the state level that are ill-informed. So our work, and I'll speak to sort of a while ago when we pushed for House Bill 2, which helped close low-performing charter schools, that work was very intentional because there are a lot of schools that aren't doing a great job at serving our kids. So in our policy work, we try to make sure that policy educators as well as legislators understand sort of what's happening across the landscape and how that work is impacting our children on the ground. So we do think there's a lot of work that needs to happen at the state level, but there does, as Ben pointed out earlier, there needs to be some sort of data. You gotta hold schools accountable by some metric, so it's taking some of the soft metrics as well as some of the hard metrics and figuring out what's the best investments you can make.
And so Leah, when you're thinking about training people into the profession, how much does UC even talk about these things with teachers? Because it seems like this might be a gap where we talk about how to do teaching and learning. Here's how to teach a lesson. But how are we talking about big scale issues with teachers to understand how they're a part of the whole system?
So certainly when I went through my own teacher prep program many years ago, I had none of that, but I think we've gotten better at that. Back to the data part, you know, our programs now have classes on data literacy and assessment because we think, you know, testing for testing's sake does no one any good. And so if our teachers don't know how to use that data and they aren't looking at it, and if they aren't, you know, really most teachers, no test score is ever going to be a surprise if they're doing the right things formatively along the way. So we work a lot with our students on data literacy and assessment, but also on big issues. You know, right away from the beginning of our Intro to Ed class, we're talking about big issues. I don't know if any of you were here with Dr. Stitzline last year. She teaches a course for our undergraduates on education policy and reform that introduces them to these big issues, and a lot of teacher education students take that class, and then also other majors from out the university. But we try to prepare them to enter that dialogue, you know, both as advocates for students and then advocates for themselves as teachers once they get out into the field. Because we hope that they'll be, you know, advocates for the profession and themselves, but also change agents within the communities that we prepare them for.
Yes.
So I don't know that historically teacher ed has been all that great at that, but I think universities have gotten a lot better about that in the last 5-10 years.
Okay. And so Marisa, as you're doing the work then on teacher professional development, how much are you informed by organizations like higher ed institutions like UC who are doing teacher training, or practitioners on the ground like CFT, and then developing what you are doing to meet teachers' needs?
Yeah, sure. So some of Mayerson Academy's history has been in professional development specifically for teachers. It started about 27 years ago, and we were one of the leading institutions for professional development for teachers. So we lean a lot on our history within professional development, and then within our own curriculum that we've developed for social and emotional learning, we take two bodies of research. One is Castle's framework for social and emotional learning, which is about 20 plus years now, and using their data and best practices, as well as VIA Institute on Character, which is a local organization that's internationally known, and they are about 15 plus years in their research. So we take the history of those three programs to combine it to meet the needs of each individual school. So we work very closely with different organizations that are helping with school and school culture. There's one local organization that's more national, is High Schools at Work, focus on school culture and school improvement to kind of develop what is it that teachers need in order to meet some of those positive school cultures. And we are very focused at Mayerson Academy on a strengths-based approach. So if you're familiar with VIA Character Strengths, it's taking the foundational research of positive psychology, which I as a teacher love, and saying, if we went out, regardless of, you know, nationality, country, age, religion, historical time, here are 24 character strengths that are going to be true to everyone. And so instead of some social emotional learning program saying, here are the 7 things, 8 things that you need to be poured into, we tell teachers and students they're enough. So it's taking all that research and helping teachers understand that you and your students are enough, see your strengths, and use them to navigate the world.
To Tiana's point about asset space.
Yeah. So we really try to focus in on knowing your strengths and owning them.
That's great. So Sonia, when you're then, 5 minutes, when you're doing the, you're working with universities to help those students succeed, how are the universities connected with their own K-12, with the K-12 ecosystem to drive the pathways successfully? So I hear you're embedded to do things universities may not be doing well enough. Are you trying to foster better relationships from K-12?
Yeah, so I think we work fully in partnership with our universities, but when I think about San Jose State, which is one of our, was where we actually started back in 2013, they have a really great relationship with their local public school district there. And so we're trying to build collaborations with the departments on campus that serve those students. So if you come in from the local public school and you're part of their EOF program or you're on a scholarship program, we're working to say, how do we filter more of your students through our course? How do we make it fit in their schedule? I would say it's a work in progress. We're only 6 years old, and so we're trying to figure out on each of our campuses how to do that. But I think at Rutgers Newark, they have a lot of Newark public school students that go to Rutgers Newark. And we are talking with them, and also with the charter partners like the KIPS of the world or Uncommon Schools that also have a lot of students that go to our campuses, and saying, how do we identify your students when they're there, tell them about our program, and then support them. And we're seeing a lot of energy around that, because I think people are realizing, as the research is this, like, a lot more studies are coming out about this job inequity, workforce inequity that exists, that they're saying, oh yeah, we want to support our students in after college, but we don't have the resources to do that. How can we partner with you? So I do want to also say, everybody's been making me think about the things that you can do in K-12, back to your first question to me, around like social emotional learning shows up in college. And it shows up in the confidence. We say there's 4 things that we build with our students. One of them is confidence. And if you know your story and you know your strengths and you're confident, then you're going to be much more confident going into that interview. You're going to be much more confident in choosing your path. If you're prepared for college and you have less remedial classes to take, and you have more room for things like Braven to take. And so they all kind of connect. So I don't know if that answered your question, but let me know.
Thorough by going back to the first one.
Yes, yeah, I've been thinking about, I'm like, oh, and I want to jump in here. Am I allowed to comment? Yes, please do that.
So you will be able to talk now when we go to small groups, which is really great. I will say there's one thing I think would be really great for all of you to do in follow-up, which is to give to Elisa a list of books that you read, authors, people you follow on social media, other ways that you inform yourself about best practices in education or these other big issues, because as you all are considering public office and wanting to get informed about the decisions you make for young people, I think it would be great to hear from you all about how you keep up yourselves on those topics. So thank you each for doing this, and now we're going to break.
Thank you. Yes, and that's such a good point, because one of the things we talk about, and I'm not going to try to make my way through the maze again, so I'm just going to talk over Megan. So one of the things we talk about with this group a lot is you're going to learn a lot in school, but you're also going to learn a lot about what you don't know, and then it's on you to figure out how you're going to fill in those blanks. So that is such a great question. So please do send Nicole or me, what are the things that you read? What are those books, blogs, newsletters? What are those things that you read to keep yourself up to date or that have been really meaningful in forming your thoughts on these issues? So thank you for that. So we are going to take a couple-minute break in just a minute, and I'm going to put up a slide here in a sec that shows you our small groups that we're going to go into. So again, this is the time to dive deeper. Saw lots of people taking lots of notes, ask lots of great questions. Again, one of the things we talk about all the time here is we're going to present you all with lots of great people doing really important work. What you get out of it is what you put into it, right? And that is largely driven by the questions you ask and then how you listen. So this is your time to do that. So we're going to be in some smaller groups here. I'm going to put some potential questions up here in a second as well. Don't have to ask those. This really should be driven by what questions you have, what you want to know. But I will put them up here, and then in the group next door, we have some of them printed out. So these are just kind of some of the systems level questions. Some of the stuff I know that as a group we've been talking and thinking about. That would be great to hear from these folks. But again, you don't have to ask these, driven by your questions. So these are our small groups. So we're going to start during this break. Nicole and I will do some rearranging to the room. Over in this front corner where Alex and Jay and Annie are sitting now, that's where our local folks are going to be. So if you're starting in group 1 at 11 o'clock, please sit there. Back in this corner our national folks, Sonia and Marisa. They'll be right over here, and then our folks who are going to be talking about teachers are going to be right next door. So if you're starting in group 3, please go ahead and start next door. We always start on time so we can end on time, and so at 11, please be seated there. We'll come into the rooms and tell you when you have about 5 minutes left in your small group, and then when you end. And then how the rotation will go is just if you start here, you'll move 1 down. Okay, so here we'll move 1 down, here we'll move 1. And then after round 2, we'll break for lunch. All right? So let's take a little bit, just a little break. Seated at your first group at 11 o'clock. Thank you. No flashing.
Thank you all for being here on Saturday.
We have about 100 teachers from CPS here doing PD.
That's what that is.
This is a busy day.
Well, yeah, I
It was a panel presentation. That's it.
We're gonna get the mic closer to you all so we can capture some of that.
Can I ask a curriculum question?
You sure can.
So, I hear people say that our curriculum was designed in like the Industrial Revolution to just churn out students. Maybe it was redesigned slightly with Sputnik and other things. But what do you think about so for instance, I love how like evidence based and data based like your comments were. That was super inspiring for me. I see with my own daughter, it's still when she goes to math class, it's about doing an algorithm, which was probably great in the 1950s before there were computers, and it's all about can I spit out this sort of equation, and I have to do it exactly like this. So she'll ask me how to do it, and she'll say, oh no Dad, you can't do it like that. It's the right answer, but my teacher won't accept that, and that's it's all about that algorithm. And I'll tell you, so I'm somebody at a P&G. I do models, and I forecast things, and I do data science work, and it's never once has somebody said, well, it's the right answer, but let me see your algorithm, and it's more like the computer does the algorithm, and we try to set up what is the problem, how do I translate from a real world problem into a language that computers can know and understand, data literacy, understand it when it comes out. Any thoughts on how to change the curriculum to make it more meaningful and do the things that the people are really good at, and have the things that the computers are good at, let computers do that.
Right. First off, that is not the curriculum of just computation. So this is what I'm saying. The challenge is really working with our teachers. So if you look at national and even our state standards, it is a lot deeper. So if we're talking about math, they have went from here to here. So the research is clear that we got to go deeper. So they are supposed to be developing models of why they came up with this answer. So our curriculum is based on Engage New York. We're doing an adoption for math this year. Our science and reading is based on evidence-based, gathering information from the text and forming your own ideas. And so I think that's a shift in helping our teachers understand how to deliver the new curriculum. Curriculum is just not only content, but it's also pedagogy. How do you deliver this? So keep pushing, because that is exactly what's supposed to be happening in the classroom. And not only that, discourse. So students can see there are multiple ways to get to a solution. So it's not, do they need to know basic facts? Yes. But ultimately, it is deeper. It is deeper. So the curriculum has changed. National level, state level, local level.
Can I answer that as an uneducated person in this regard? I think one of the things that interests me as a parent too is the idea that we don't want to just give everything over to technology, but we want our folks to understand the root, how things have informed. People make technology, right? We don't just have robots that are putting out answers. Somebody's telling the robot what to do. Somebody's telling the tech program what to do. We want to know how it goes into those things, being able to make decisions.
Yeah, but even more important, my daughter doesn't understand what the math is ever used for. She's just doing an algorithm, and what I'm saying is, like, I went all through the system. It wasn't until college in my engineering where I realized, hey, with these linear algebras, I can schedule like the most efficient route for garbage trucks. I can like, there's all sorts of problems that can be solved to math. It's not just about.
So you're saying there's not a practical application that's explained.
Well, there's no understanding of why she's doing any of this stuff. She's just doing a set series of things, just like a computer.
Yeah.
And you should have a grasp of what the computer's doing for sure. But ultimately, it's more exciting if you know why what sort of problems it can be applied to. Like, if you don't know what it can be applied to, you're never going to use it.
So it's a big shift from students being consumers of information and creators of information.
Yeah.
So that's what we have to get to as a country.
Yeah.
And I was a kid. I was an empty vessel and people poured in. And I mean, that was the thinking. You know nothing, student. We will tell you how to think, what to think, where to think. And we have to shift. But as far as curriculum, the written curriculum goes, it's more aligned to what you're saying. It's the pedagogy. It's how teachers deliver this instruction to really get at that deeper thinking. But the written curriculum.
So the shift is there.
The shift is there. Okay. But we have to work not only with, so this is what I did as a principal. So this whole Engage New York, and I'm just facts. When we started with Engage New York, and it's very different. It's just going deeper. Where they have to build models for addition. Yeah. And they have to, it's just very different. I started in kindergarten. I stayed a month in kindergarten, learned how the teacher delivered, and moved up to first, second, and to be quite honest, I was stuck on third grade for a while because it wasn't just this kind of memorizing facts thing, and I was more intrigued by the conversation, the conversations of why did the kids decide to use this method, or them questioning each other.
It's like they're the inventor. They're coming up with like, oh, here's why it works.
This is what works for me as a learner. So it's a shift, but I will say that the national standards, they have made that shift. I think in education and how we deliver the curriculum needs to teachers.
And what about a shift away? So I'm an engineer, so I use a little bit of calculus, but basically no one uses calculus in the real world. Basically no one. But people use statistics all the time. Data is rich. Everywhere you go, you're going to have to be able to interpret data. Yet you don't see stats or data analysis very highly in our curriculum. You see people pushing towards calculus, which most people really never going to do. So what about a shift on more like the understanding the data and more understanding of the statistics, which is all around us every day, as opposed to calculus, which you can program in your computer actually relatively easy today.
Right. I would say this again is this partnership with the university level, because math, I know we're on math, is very sequential. So you do algebra, geometry, trig, calculus, stats. I mean that's how it has been structured. That's what the universities are looking for, and what typically happens as you go through this pipeline, students who really have this desire, they double up on the math, or they accelerate in math so they can hit that stats class. But I think there's conversations to be had across the board. But I know that structure, really, that's how it's always been, and that's what the colleges kind of look for those, how did you do in this class, and where does it relate here?
And I know they don't have that same structure overseas in a lot of other countries. It's not like this.
It's not sequential, It's very sequential here.
Thank you.
I'm really curious about your organization, Brian. So I'm assuming you're nonprofit. Are you based locally here, or is it
in Cincinnati?
Okay.
That's correct.
So how do you give money? Where do you get money? What
Yeah.
is your structure?
Yeah, I'll
like,
agree.
who would support an organization like yours?
Yeah, so let me take it back to sort of where this all started. This would have been 12 years ago. What? No, you gotta like give me the years. We were all around. So Cincinnati Public Schools some years ago decided to redo their facilities plan. So this is $1 billion facilities master's plan, which was fantastic because every school in the district over the last 12 years got a makeover or some sort of supports and resources. And so along that time, the business community, thanks to Audrey and some of the leadership, not personally, but she came along into this space and was critical in their work, started really digging into how do we ensure that every student in our city has the best education possible? What sort of resources are required to make sure that our schools are prepared, that our families are prepared, that our kids are prepared. And so there were sort of some early investments made to look at different education opportunities. One big investment was in a college prep public boarding school. In DC and Baltimore, Maryland, there was a school that was launched called the Seed Foundation. And basically, you know about Seed, it was a great model. That's right. That's another conversation. We're gonna connect some dots here. It was really a fantastic model because what we saw was that there was a gap in students being able to sort of learn and achieve in traditional classroom settings because they had so many issues at home, right? And so the model was kids come to the campus on Sunday, they stay till Friday, go home just on the weekends. So that way they have all the time and energy and resources they need to really focus on academic instruction. So they're getting caught up and getting ahead. So there was a family in Cincinnati, the Farmer Family Foundation, founded of Cintas Corporation, who looked across the nation for the best models, found this, and decided they wanted to dive into that. I fortunately was able to meet some folks, learn about the model, and then they hired me as the executive director to help bring this to Ohio. And so this was a $60 million effort in partnership with the state, the federal government, and also in partnership with Cincinnati Public Schools to launch a school right here in the city.
So we have a model like that now where
we
kids
don't.
go from
I
was like, what?
You asked me where it came from. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm taking you way back to where this all came
Okay.
from. It didn't happen because of some state political reasons, but the interest and the commitment of the business community stayed. And so they said, you know what, if we can't do this $60 million boarding school serving 400 kids a year, can we do something to serve 4,800 kids a year? And so again, looking across the country at the best models and talking to local leaders, CPS was part of the conversations, the CFT was part of the conversations, local business leaders and community partners were all part of this conversation.
The Archdiocese?
Archdiocese part of the conversation to talk about where there were needs and opportunities in Cincinnati, and they came up with this model, which is sort of known across the country as a quarterback organization, meaning my organization helps to develop plays and design strategies and invest in programs that work to create access to high quality schools for all kids. So the foundation initially was a $25 million fund.
From Farmer Family?
Not just Farmer Family, across the community. All right, so we have donors such as GE Aviation, who's been a district partner for a very, very long time. The Cincinnati Business Committee is a partner in that as well, and the Farmer Family Foundation, Hale Foundation, which is a large organization in town that invests in education as well. And so we were able to pool the resources and invest in 3 different core areas. $15 million towards high quality schools. So how do you invest in what's working and help them to scale and serve more kids? $5 million directly towards talent. So all the folks you heard talk about talent strategies and investing in principals and school leaders and teachers. So we invest in strategies and individuals in that sense as well. And then $5 million for the operational side of things, right? So how do you help engage families and help them understand how to access the best high quality schools? How do you work with the state in understanding sort of where state policies are and how to better inform strategies for and supporting our kids? And so all that said, we've made investments across. That's why we're agnostic, right? We make investments across the entire city because we listen to the community, we listen to our partners, and we invest in what works.
Is there a parallel with Preschool Promise, with them trying to say, hey, let's go in here and let's raise the quality of existing preschools and make sure that their teachers have
There's
appropriate training?
There's definitely a parallel thinking, right? And the parallel thinking is, again, there should be high quality across the board. So I shouldn't have to move out of the city to have access to a great preschool. Yeah. If there's a preschool across the street from me, it should be high quality and high rated. And so the Preschool Promise emphasis was on getting all of those preschools in the city certified and qualified. And so we sort of look at it the same way, not on the early education side, but on the K-12 side to say, you know what, there are some really great opportunities in Cincinnati that are underutilized or underfunded. How do we invest in that? What we don't do a lot of, and so this is where it gets a little controversial, is we don't do a lot of turnaround work. Right? Like there are funders who invest in how do you take the worst schools and make them better. That's not my job, right?
There's still kids going to. I mean, anytime you have a spectrum, there's still some kids going to those worst schools, and they're probably not getting everything they need.
Absolutely. So what we do is when we talk about state policy, when we think about schools that aren't working like from the charter schools, we advocate for policies that either hold them accountable or force them to go out of business, right? Because we want to make sure that the families are having access to the great school options that they deserve.
Isn't Ohio known for having charters that have poor quality that we don't keep accountable? I mean,
yes. So here's the big challenge with Ohio. So in
the one.
Yeah, this Ohio has been the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
We'll be the first to admit that, and that's why we're trying to clean up the market while we're creating a strong market as well. So initially, there was very loose restrictions or loose laws around how charter schools will be held accountable. So you had for-profit operators getting into business and starting up schools and doing things like leasing schools back to, they were buying buildings and leasing them back to the schools.
Private prisons.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so, unfortunately, that did happen. That is part of Ohio's history. Our job is to correct that. And so what we found, though, is that there are a handful of really great charter schools that are knocking it out the park. United Schools Network in Columbus, right? So they partner with Columbus Public Schools. They serve 90% economically disadvantaged kids, and they have a B overall, and kids are, doing very, very well. So when you look at the handful of opportunities, what we've said is, okay, how do you invest in more of those, right? Like, we get the market and we get the conversation. It's very controversial. But we can't right everyone else's wrongs. What we can do is focus on what is working and make sure Cincinnati has access to those opportunities too.
How do you know if you're successful in this space? I mean, so you've had X number of years to implement. You're engaged in a lot of different arenas in terms of school structures. What's your
So
how am I okay?
we hold our grantees accountable for results, right? So when we look at things like growth metrics, how are the students growing? Are they actually learning? Are they gaining? You can actually tangibly see how much ground a child is covering within a school year. Those are things we look for. And taking a step back, we also look at the track record of school. Does a school have a history of doing this work in serving our low-income, most disadvantaged kids and being successful? So if they don't have a history of it, that becomes a challenging conversation, because we've had opportunities to invest in schools across all sectors where they've come to us and said, hey, we have a good idea, we want to do this, would you give us money for this? And we look at a track record and say, we can't invest in this, but if there's a partnership with a high quality program, or if you have a data set that shows us what you're doing is really working for our most disadvantaged kids, then we'll have a different conversation. But we look at the data, we look at the leadership, we look at the engagement around the schools. So we listen to families. Families will come and tell us, like, look, we don't like this school, or we do like this school. Can you help us? And it's not as simple as, okay, Mom, we've had, parents come to us and say, well, we want an all-girls school. Well, okay, so I can't just write a check for $1 million to do an all-girls school. If there's no plan, there's no strategy, there's no way they can sustain a school like that, there's no infrastructure. So we don't do that stuff. But we will listen to the responses and then try to find where we can invest in the highest quality options for those families.
So if I can ask, being
Can I suggest something?
sorry.
Could we give some other people a chance at the table to also ask some questions? Is that good?
John's on fire over here.
He's
got this thing, look. Always.
Because I saw Jerika was about to ask something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, because you moderated, you didn't get a chance to answer any questions at all. I know. So you got your chance now.
That's why you said yes. Stay neutral. It's a game.
So, with coming from the business community, one of the things that you said that you do, your focus is on recruiting and retaining the workforce and making the businesses a part of the solution. And with Cincinnati Public, their goals now is to enroll, enlist, or employ. But whenever you hear the business community talk, they always talk about the workforce is just totally unprepared. They have they educational wise, they're unprepared. What is the gap that has been identified? If it has not been identified, what is the perceived gap, and what steps are they taking to fill that in, since everybody seems to kind of start to get on the same page?
So before I joined the Cincinnati Chamber, I worked for the Cincinnati Business Committee, which is an organization of executives from the top companies in Cincinnati, and if you're involved in school boards, you likely know that they care a lot about our local school board and who is on it. So they've been involved as a partner to CPS for over 40 years to try to improve educational outcomes for young people for this very thing that you said, which is this understanding that, especially for our largest district, which is CPS, if our young people they don't know what they need to know by the end of 12th grade, whether they're going to go to college and further their career, or they're going to go into the military, or they're going to go right into the workforce, it's in our economy's best interest for the school district to, for lack of a better word, produce young people who are prepared to go to work well. And so the business community is self-serving in some regards to say, we want a workforce that is prepared for work. And part of what I'm hearing from employers now are around things like the trades. We haven't done enough of a good job with young people to say you can build a life for yourself as an electrician, as a plumber, working in advanced manufacturing and some other ways. But employers are still saying we also want a diverse, well-educated workforce that's gone through community colleges or undergraduate degrees or graduate degrees, and how can we encourage the K-12 system to do better at producing those young people. And when you look at large urban districts across the state, Cincinnati is the best. I can't make this correlation completely, but I really think that a game changer for this region over these last decades is a close partnership between the district and the business community, who sees it as complementary to trying to get work done. That has sometimes been uncomfortable because the business community doesn't always agree with what the district is doing. The business community then does things like invest in Accelerate Great Schools, which the district doesn't necessarily like either. So there are tension points that from the business community standpoint, they think that it drives competition, which ends up having better results for people. The district and the business community can get behind bad charter schools should close, and they should be done because we should be sending kids to good schools. So, but this business community is also saying for the neighborhood schools that aren't having the results, that kids are still in these schools failing, and we need adults to be out there rallying for what can we do to drive better outcomes for those kids. And there's this belief that I think is still unshakable. Young people can achieve regardless of their backgrounds, and we should hold them to the standards that Tiana talked about. We should expect them to succeed. And now I see my work doing this other side, which is, but we also should solve for the fact that young people who are growing up in poverty or with other traumas, we should be doing more to support them so that their parents are not creating additional children who are growing up in those kinds of environments. So we've got to be working at this at two levels. So I'm now focused on how can companies support their workforce to pay the parents of kids who are employed or who are going to CPS so that we can be doing better on both ends. That sounds like it's like a total like a good thing to do. It's really big work. It's really difficult kinds of work. But as is true for poverty and education and so many of these issues, they are complicated. They're interrelated. How can you pull a lever that has the greatest impact as soon as possible? Because we want kids to thrive sooner than later.
Well, I don't think it sounds lofty or anything at all. I think it's necessary because if businesses are going to insert themselves in that arena, you're putting yourself in an institution that has precedence for a solid 13 years. In our future. And at the same time, if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that you are being just and equitable in what you're doing. And by doing that, they need to ensure that they are not further instituting a class and caste society by doing that. So it's not lofty, it's your responsibility. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it from both ends, and you're going to do it correctly. So
I think you just nailed it. And just to piggyback on what you're saying and Audra's points, when you look at statistics, and this is just like what's happening in our society, 60% of the jobs created over the next 20 years are going to be post-secondary or require post-secondary training, right? So it just is what it is. So then you think about, okay, so how does that translate into our kids who are ready? Because I believe in all aspects of kids, graduating, being prepared for whatever they want to go into, but it should be their choice. Every child should have the education to say, I want to go into the military, or I want to go to college, or I want to go right into the workforce.
Or start a business.
Or start a business. That is their decision. That's their choice. So the education has to prepare every child so they can make that choice, not push them into a direction because they don't have the skills or abilities to go in one or the other. Because at the end of the day, if the companies can't hire, they move, right? And we complain as a community that we don't have jobs. There aren't opportunities. They have to go where the workforce is. So why not create the workforce here so companies don't have to leave? Or we create incentives for companies to come here.
We're doing that too.
Absolutely.
If there is no question yet, earlier, Tiana, you mentioned that principals create the culture to get it done. And when you were talking about how they kind of, or the perception or the understanding or the role moved from management to all these things that principals need to be developed, why is this just now a realization in your opinion? I would like,
seems pretty
what
obvious.
did principals think they were supposed to be doing this whole time? And why is this just now coming to light?
Preparation programs. So when you're a teacher, like that's why I started there. When you're a teacher, you're just kind of in your little classroom. You go and say, hey, I want to be a principal. I want to manage. You go to university level. That's how they were trained. That's how they would do your budget, make sure people have their supplies. It's so much deeper. So I don't think it's necessarily
really instilling. I feel like that's like a
aha moment, even like with the curriculum. It's
reversing the respect.
but it's a shift in thinking and training.
A little bit of dirt on me. I'm an attorney.
Because there's so much responsibility, I think it's a level of also being overwhelmed. And where do you get your positive feedback from? So you usually will get the positive feedback on crisis situations. So something happened, as a principal, I'm able to fix it right there. It is hard to fix gaps in achievement. You're not going to, a kid who's 3 years behind, you're not going to see the result at the end of the day. So I think also part of it is understanding systems work and not just I make an impact on this individual. It's also a shift around, and this is my growth when I first went into administration. First went into education because I love kids. Then I was a teacher, then I went into the principalship because I love kids. But the problem was I didn't get the training to say, you are there as a teacher of teachers. It's a different skill set. So there are gaps in our principal skill sets. And the research is relatively new. It's only about 12 to 15 years old on this because a lot of research has been on teachers. So to make that shift to say principals matter and they impact teachers' work, it is new. I'm with you. It doesn't. It would make sense, okay? If the teachers are the one, what is the biggest influence on them? That's where you're going to get the greatest impact. That's where you should start. But the training hasn't been set up that way. It was to be a manager, and we looked at that's why we have so many parents going, I want this teacher, I want this. So everything was about an individual contributor. It wasn't about the school as a whole. I'm on kindergarten, they will map it out. Kindergarten, I want this teacher, first grade, I want this teacher, second grade. It's bigger than that. It's a system, and that principal is responsible for creating that system. So it's just a shift in thinking.
And a long game is also what you're saying. You're investing in things now that don't have an immediate payoff. That's a long. You're really trying to play that long game to see the results.
Yes.
I mean, that's also what the business community is doing through preschool. This is a long game, and we believe it has the right outcomes, but how do you sustain people's interest in stuff like that that doesn't have immediate results? People like crisis because then you had a crisis, and then you had it fixed, and that was so satisfying.
I checked it off my list.
Yeah. So you got someone who is 4 years old and doesn't know colors, you know, how do you make sure that person that graduates from high school, like, ready to go become an electrician? People lose interest in some ways, you know. As a society, we're just, some of that's hard to do.
So who's becoming principals? Like, is it teacher? Yeah, like, what's the pipeline look like now? And do you have to be a teacher first? Like, what's...
No. So, but majority follow the traditional teacher. Go get your certification, license.
Okay, what's the certification then? Like?
You basically you can go for a master's,
Okay.
but it's a principal certification, and you go through Ohio Department of Education. But then there's alternative routes. There was a big push for a while. I think it kind of blew up where business folks said okay, and so they did an alternative license.
Does that align with the charter school?
Not necessarily, but I was an administrator in a business, a manager in a business. I can run a school, and so they went for an alternative license. That still is in place, but they saw a lot of turnover on those people from the business world going in. The principal.
I think it chewed people up.
And there's certain programs. There was a Bright Fellow program, kind of similar to like Teach for America. A Bright Fellow program where it's not necessarily business, but I was an engineer, and I just want to do service work, and they go back to school, and so it's different paths, but most of it is teacher to principal.
And are they the most successful then, do you feel?
I wouldn't, for me, it's not necessarily the path. It's, at the end of the day, it's about three things. Relationships. And if you don't have that, I don't care what your background is. It doesn't matter, because as a principal of a high school, I'm not going to know. If I went to school and I was a English major, I have no idea what the chemistry teachers do. I have no idea what, you can't be a master of all the content, but I got to know people. I got to know good pedagogy of what should be happening in a physics class. I don't care if it's an English. Do I have student discourse? Are students engaged? Is it a sit and get? So I think the path is not necessarily important, but I think it's a level of humbleness. That's why I think it broke down with the business world. Like, I can do this because everybody went to school, so everybody thinks they know education. So I can do this. It's a level of humbleness as a leader, because ultimately it's not about the title. I can't control you as a teacher. I have to convince you that this is best for kids. And when you come in the mindset that I am the boss and I'm the authority and the expert, and I'm telling you and giving you the directive, and you're going to do it, it's not going to happen. Especially in a union teachers-based system. I mean, it's just really not going to happen. So you're going to have that real great leadership and trust to move that work.
But what you just shared helps a lot, in my opinion, for us, because not everybody here wants to be a public official. We're all education advocates on top of that. So the fact that we're learning that quality principals are needed. There's an alternative way to get licensure. Some of us may consider doing that, and some of the better suit ones may be from social work, may be from being in clerical, may be
activism.
Exactly. So
okay. So one of the questions that I have for you, it's double-headed sword. So I sit as a parent of 2 children in CPS. 2 have graduated and are now in college. I also mentor in CPS. So I see the student side and I see the parent side, or the teacher side. So what is happening right now with the violence that is happening in our city is affecting our children and how they learn. It is affecting the teachers and how they teach. What are we looking at? What kind of discussion are you all having as a larger entity to support the tragic things and the events? I have walked into classes where children are distraught, where teachers are crying and they need emotional support. And I've asked, are you thinking about having some rap sessions to support your staff to deal with what's going on? Because you can't hide it.
Right.
They're dealing with it, and some of the responses were, we don't know where to go for help.
Yeah.
So my question is, even as advocates in the community, how do we help support this initiative? Because it's not changing. You know, we can't go in and just take all the guns from everyone and tell the kids to stop shooting each other and things of that nature. But when they get to school, they should be in a safe place where they can learn. And the teachers need to feel empowered enough that, yes, my student lost her brother last night. I have enough courage that I can sit for a minute and talk to them about what's happening. How do we do that? How do we advocate in that behalf?
And we see the same thing. So one of the systemic things we have done is create a department.
Okay.
Positive School Culture. Dr. Bunger is the director of this department now. Out of this department is professional development. Out of this department are social workers. What we did do, a lot of the social workers for years have been tracking attendance and doing home visits. So we, I think it was 19 attendance clerks that we hired. So they can do that work. So the social workers are available to staff and students. So it is a huge issue, and it's not just a school issue, it's a community issue. So we have mental health services in all of our schools, a partnership with Mind Peace. We have developed partnerships with the police department and the fire department, and just really to kind of come together as a community to help support, fix, have dialogue about this. I know there was I think it's the Black pastors, or it could be just the Baptist pastors, meet monthly to discuss this and bringing educators to the table. So a variety of approaches need to be had. And I think the biggest and probably the most overlooked is getting kids to talk about solutions and coming to the table and what's going on. And so it's something that's at our front door, and we're trying to be systematic about it. And one thing is to have an owner of that. So when something is happening, it's not, I don't know where to go. Now we have Dr. Bunger. So it's just this year.
What's the name of that again?
Positive School Culture. It's a department who's dealing with all the SCL. She's over all the school social workers. We have a partnership with Children's Hospital. So it's 2 research-based programs. One is called PATH and one is called PACS. So it's a curriculum on how to teach social and emotional learning. So just developing those partnerships and trying to provide resources for our students and teachers. But I think we have to go to the Gemba and talk to kids and hear from them and to get the greatest impact.
Exactly. Okay. Last question, I know we're going to wrap up, is I know that the graduation requirements have changed. How is that communication being given to the parents? I have a 9th grader. I asked him some questions. He was unsure of what he needs to be focused on and what he should be working on. So I, as an advocate, and my kids, education is most important. I'm going over his head and saying, hey, what does my child need to be working on? He has a 3.9 GPA right now. He's had it since elementary school. What do I need to do to make him continue to be successful in this school that unfortunately is failing?
We have sent out letters and some mailers directly home. There's information you can go on Power School, and we have to do different approaches because everyone doesn't necessarily have access to the computer. So we try to send stuff home. But the problem though is the state is constantly changing the rules. So waiting to figure out, even with the new, I was going to say recommendations, but even with the new graduation requirements, they still haven't figured out certain things. So you're kind of waiting to get full information, but whether it's through Power School, whether it's through, it's just different. I'm just saying communication as a whole. Letters sent home, letters in the backpack. It's just hard because you'll be surprised how many, and this is just issues of poverty when people are moving, where we sent it and it's back, or we call robocall
school and the numbers are not correct, or, you know, so finding different ways to engage our families is the best way to communicate differently and frequently.
Thank you.
But to be transparent, like 95% of our students are persisting in college. And so I think that once they
John, you did have another question.
Yeah, so Brian in particular, I think as a group we would say, like, it's not just about someone's math score or their English score that moving up. That's important, but it's there's more to the whole child than just that. When you're considering a school like a successful school, what is a good measure to capture the rest of those things, like, you know, EQ and happiness? I think you mentioned. Like, how do you think about it? Do you have any insight on that?
So we do, and this may not be a satisfying answer, but it really depends on the school partner and the issue that they've identified. So I'll use our 2 district investments as examples. When we invested in a Spencer school, the district came to us, leadership and board said basically, we've identified over 6,000 kids across the city of Cincinnati who qualify for gifted or exceptional services that aren't receiving them, right? And so what happens is, if you qualify or if you're gifted or exceptional, you don't receive the services, by 6th grade you begin to regress. So you start going backwards because your needs haven't been met. So the district came to us and said, will you partner with us to do the Spencer Academy, right? And so we didn't get into, tell us all the social emotional aspects. They identified a gap that they were solving for, and they went out, they looked at schools across the country, they pulled programs locally here, and they created a really strong curriculum that we invested in. Similarly with Walnut Hills. Walnut Hills is known as one of the best schools in the state and in the country, right? So if your kid's going to be successful in high school, the theory is they have to go to Walnut Hills. That shouldn't be the case. Walnut Hills reached out to us and said, hey, we got a gap. Some of our low-income minority kids are not making it through. We need to solve for that. How can you help us solve for that? Then they came up with a plan to create a student success center on site at the school where kids who need help can leave class and go get individual tutoring and supports that they need. We gave them a grant to do that. So it's not always as clear as how do we address specific issues on the curriculum side. It's more of where are our partners coming to us in terms of the gaps and the opportunities, and does in sort of our assessment it qualify as a high quality option, right? And so in both these investment opportunities, we're really excited about what we're seeing. Kids are learning, they're solving for gaps that were in the education system, and so those are programs we look for.
We do. Yeah. We have a curriculum that's embedded into CPS.
Yeah.
The group
One more.
I think everyone's doing the Jessica.
I know,
that's that question.
Right?
Right.
Well, of the test on strategic and relationships and empathy, and that can't.
Oh, you did StrengthsFinder?
Yeah,
okay.
My husband and I did it when we started dating.
Ah.
I mean, he'd already done it before, but we did a lot of tests. He's a data guy, also named John, like this data guy. And so he needed a lot of like hard data for us to like make our relationship work, and it works.
There you go. You probably have some woo in there then too.
Yeah.
Probably maybe not in top 5, but
Not in top 5, but definitely yes. I'm a Kool-Aid drinker, so
Yeah.
he would explain.
Well, welcome to the National Breakout Group. Hope you came with questions. We'll answer whatever you ask. Yeah.
Your group got kind of rowdy in here. What was all that
Did we?
about?
Oh,
We were having a good time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. My voice projects.
I like to make jokes, so there's
Yeah. And Marisa and I worked together for like many years, so
yeah.
there's
We also have some camaraderie.
Yeah.
We're friends in real life.
We're friends
We're
in real life.
outside this room.
Yeah.
Nice.
If you've taken the StrengthsFinder, you should take the VIA survey. That's my plug
yeah,
for
there you go.
the VIA.
Yeah.
VIA.
There's another one everyone keeps telling me.
Oh, the
about,
Enneagram?
too, the Enneagram.
Yeah.
But someone
I'm an
already
Enneagram
told me,
3.
she's like, I know you're a 7. And I was like, well, what do I need to take the test for? Answer.
So the VIA survey is what our curriculum is based off of. So the VIA survey is actually the research behind the VIA survey is the foundational research for positive psychology. So all of positive psychology research created these 24 character strengths. I'll pass this around.
I pulled it up on my phone so I can have it look for it later
So
on.
these are the 24 character strengths. I think as a person who was a classroom teacher for many years and an instructional coach, particularly supporting teachers who are struggling with classroom management, I would have loved to have this language. So things that really get me jazzed about our particular program and the way we approach social emotional learning is, one, character strengths, because they're rooted in positive psychology. I always believe that when something is grounded in something else, it makes it a little bit stronger. Not saying that other things aren't, but when they went around the world, so there were 55 scientists who researched different times in history, different religions, different races, different cultures, whatever they wanted to research, what they found was that these 24 character strengths, regardless of where you were in history or in time or in the world, these were 24 character strengths that were common between everyone.
For humans?
Yeah, for humans. Like, these are the 24 character strengths, and when we're living our best life, these is what we all have, and we're innately born with them. It's not something that we have to pour into. It's not something like kids need to. They have to do this one thing, and I think I've seen so many character strengths program where it's like, we have to build into kids these 3 things instead of saying, this is actually just who you are. Let's find out how you've been using them throughout your life. And I love that it's founded on the fact that 2 psychologists, I'm just really tired of using the DSM to think about what's wrong with everyone. Let's help them figure out what's right about them and use that to shift our perspective about, we're all doing the right thing, just do it.
Well, and then when you think about behavior management, for lack of a better word, I also was a teacher, that the positive reinforcement works, and even if you're a parent, you know this, positively reinforcing kids works so much better than the negative consequence. So having a shared language to be able to talk about the positive things that you see. How do you guys do that in school? I guess I'm curious about what your program looks like for CPS and globally. I guess.
It works in a lot of different ways. So depending on who our partner is, we customize it for whatever they need.
Partner being school?
Yes, the school.
Okay.
Partner being school. Sometimes we're in after-school programs. We have a pilot with the YMCA to figure out how to embed more social emotional learning into their programming. What we find, at least with, I couldn't even tell your competitors because I'm such a big truster of my boss. When we've looked at other social emotional learning programs, it talks about the Castle research. It talks about self-management. It talks about self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship building, responsible decision making, which is based off of Castle's research that's 20 plus years old. Is what you'll find is it attacks those themes but doesn't necessarily give teachers and students tangible ways of approaching it. And so which I tell every teacher, regardless of whatever it is that you're trying to do in your classroom, this is the language you should use to just navigate life. And I also say that in terms of being a parent. I have a 6-year-old who broke her elbow this summer, and we just have stuff around the house. I don't teach her any lessons, even though sometimes I feel like I want to. But that's when she had this moment this summer where she, it could have been a tantrum. She broke her arm. She was about to have surgery. And I was just asking her, tell me how you feel. And there's oftentimes, especially with a 6-year-old, they don't have the language. And what she said to me was, Mom, I don't have the bravery to go through surgery right now. And to be able to have that ability to use a shared language to navigate what it is that you need, what it is that you want, what it is that you feel is just, to me, is worth me switching jobs and doing this. And I think if I could just help teachers be strengths-based and help them have a language to identify it in students so they know what perseverance means in this class means perseverance in the next class, would be amazing. So we have a curriculum that is kindergarten through 12th grade, and depending on who our school partner is and what they need, it looks a variety of different ways. In its simplest model is we do professional development for 3 days where we focus on understanding what character strengths are, introducing to your curriculum, and we do a train the trainer model where we help you create the PD that you need to go back and do with your staff. What we find that if something is not done either embedded into systems that already exist or is done by an outsider, it's going to be the first thing that puts on the shelf as soon as times get hard. And so the more that we can build up leaders within the community to help them feel confident and customize it for their school. And when a teacher hears from another teacher, this is why I think this program is going to work with our students in this language, the more likely it is to be successful. We also have different relationships, where one teacher rolls it out, I'm doing some consulting for an international school in Switzerland. We have some partners where we've trained an organization in China to do what the curriculum is, and they help support their schools in China. Here in CPS, we're embedded into the 3-6 advisory programming, so probably 30 to 40% of the lessons within advisory for 3rd through 6th grade are all our character strengths lessons, but our language is embedded throughout. In Youngstown City Schools, we applied for a school improvement grant for the state, and so we're embedded into 5 schools very deeply with a coach twice a week. So it's a variety of different ways depending on how deep a school wants to go into embedding it and based on how many needs they have. Because what we know is in more urban schools and bigger districts, it has to be someone's priority or job in order for it to continue to move, or it has to be embedded within an initiative. We also believe that the strengths language should be something that is just the language that you use, and after that first initial year, it just should be who you are, and it shouldn't feel like something extra. It should be like, we are strengths-based, and this is just the language that we use to talk about it.
This is amazing to me because I feel like this is what makes you a human. Like, and that I feel like is what I have grown up sort of valuing. But it never got me a job. Like, I graduated college with a degree and have never used it, and not for lack of trying, but I was low income kid, and so I didn't have any connections. I didn't understand how to use the university correctly. Like, I didn't have anyone to ask anything about, you know, like how am I supposed, like that sort of thing. But those things, I am connected to every single one of those words.
It's because they're in you. We all know that.
And that is what I hope to pass to my children, are those values, and but that just makes so much more sense to me. So how does that then translate sort of like where you are? Because I feel like businesses don't give a shit about any of those things.
We have a fancier adult version, and I have another team that works with nonprofit.
Like,
well, I would say that they do in some respects, and so I think what we do, one of our first like signature events with our fellows come in, they're usually sophomores or transferred juniors, is called this thing called the Storytelling is Leadership Workshop, and it is a all day long Saturday event where we use storytelling to really pull out these character strengths that people have, their lived experience, sharing things like I'm a first generation college student, and a lot of our students we work with are immigrants, so they realize through telling their story all these things that are real strengths, and then our coaches can help them from that. Storytelling is leadership. You develop what's my elevator pitch when I go into an interview. So I'm Jessica, and I graduated from X University. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. I've also worked 3 jobs while going to school and was promoted to manager. Like, it's because it's translating those strengths into a language that people across the table from you understand. Because I think actually most employers want all of these things in every single They probably recognize that like everybody's not showing all 24 of these on a regular basis, and want to add people to their teams that do this, because happy teams, happy workers are going to make more money for a company. And curious people are going to solve problems. You're actually, like, by being curious, you're probably a problem solver. You're thinking of all the things that you could fix. So I would say that these very much translate into the workforce and to getting a strong career. We just have to give students the language to use them and to have the space to reflect on what experiences do I have that demonstrate these things, and talk about those in an interview. And what we do is we also, for students that like maybe haven't had that professional experience, maybe they've been working at Starbucks as a barista part-time through college, like the last 8 weeks of our course are a design thinking challenge with a corporate sponsor. And so they can actually talk about, like, I was the project manager for my 5 to 8 person cohort, and we won the capstone challenge. And so it's like they didn't have to have an internship, but they can talk about how they led a group, how they did all these things in their coursework.
Internships because they need paid.
Yeah, exactly. So like you can take our 3 credit hour course and have a real life experience leading a team for 8 weeks towards a challenge where you can talk about all the things. And we like very explicitly say, like, you're the project manager. It's to simulate a work experience. And there's something on the line. Like, they have a whole panel of judges from a corporation that are judging their presentations. And everybody is like super positive. There's one winner, but like, everybody's a winner because you get professional experience.
This is a super short answer. Are you guys working with Norwood schools?
Not yet. No.
Okay. And do you work with Mount St. Joseph University?
No, we don't work with anyone in Ohio right now. So we work with San Jose State.
Mount St. Joseph.
Oh, great. Yeah. Mount St. Joe would be like a perfect university partner for us. So like things that we look for when we expand to a new site are we have to have like a local business community that like will want to bring us in, because we're in partnership. It's like universities, nonprofit, and employers like all together coming together. So we have to have a university that's willing to give us credit for the course, which is actually quite a difficult thing to do to get faculty members to say that they would approve a course taught by people that aren't professors, because it's taught by local professionals that are volunteers that use our curriculum. But and then we have to have like a funding community that wants to bring us in to fund the work, and then the university has to sign on. They basically pay us a fee for service because we're the program. They get tuition dollars for students signing up in our course, and so they kind of push those tuition dollars towards us. But we look for high Pell, colleges where there's a high Pell student population, high percentage of students of color, et cetera. So, yeah.
Are you at Wilberforce?
We are not at any HBCUs yet. We are at San Jose State, Rutgers University, Newark, National Louis University, which is a little bit different than the two other big flagship like state schools. National Louis University is a small university in downtown Chicago, but it offers a bachelor's degree for under $10,000. So that basically with your Pell, it's free for students on Pell. Like they basically make it work so that your Pell dollars cover the cost of college. And so it's a really unique model where I think their highest, like it's a feeder school basically for Chicago public school students, and they're, but it's new. So there's some growing pains there too, because those students, even though they're coming with lower on average GPAs, higher needs, et cetera. So we're trying to figure out how our program adjusts for that right now. We're only in our second year of operation there.
Speaking of adjustment, Marisa, you mentioned that the program is in the 3 to 6 advisory, grades 3 to 6 here, and then you have one for the professionals. Nothing for 7th.
We do. We have through kindergarten through 12th grade, but specifically in CPS, we're embedded deeply into 3 through 6, and language is kind of sprinkled out through 7, 12. They've got a lot of there's a lot of focus on the 3Es in CPS. I don't know if you've been at Tiana's table already. She can probably talk a little bit more about that. They have so many like career exploration things that they need to do, and fitting in all like the high school requirements that they just don't. They write other very specific social emotional learning lessons for the high school.
They do.
Yeah. Okay. We're embedded. So the 4 parts of CPS advisory curriculum are academic progress monitoring, career exploration, or like secondary, post-secondary options, community building, and then social emotional learning. So I think at the high school level, from 7th through 12th grade, Mayerson has probably written somewhere between 2 or 3 lessons for each grade, and then they get very specific based on each grade level needs. Like I wrote a 3 set of diversity lessons for 8th grade because that was something that CPS was struggling with, versus social emotional learning is just holistically in 3rd through 6th grade, so they just used some of our lessons we customized some specifically for CPS. But Mayerson Academy has kindergarten through 12th grade, and then another team focuses on secondary. So post-secondary, we have a partnership with Northern Kentucky University. We're doing some strengths-based work as well as nonprofits. I think they're in their 4th cohort of bringing in nonprofits to talk about what are character strengths, how to use them within your team culture, and how can you kind of diffuse them into the work that you do.
Okay. Yes, because my thought on that was that if it's on the earlier and the professionals, we're missing that whole block. When in high school, how they were talking about the trends are now getting inside the schools or doing a number of different things for businesses. You made the connection earlier saying, hey, we kind of do this on the college level. We kind of need it here. And then when you get into high school, LaRonda brought it up earlier about a lot of things that students are going through in general. Definitely need this for life.
Yeah.
You need this because the vocations are there. You need this to go into secondary education. You need this to get a job. And a lot of, well, not a lot, but there is a sizable number that we shouldn't ignore of high school students who are parents themselves. So it's already another generation that we're starting in.
Can you coach me on this so I can be a better parent?
So it's like, it definitely needs to be there.
Specifically in CPS, I think some of the barriers we've seen is just one, since for better or for worse, I think Cincinnati, the greater Cincinnati area is a very supportive community. And so there's a lot of resources. I'm sure you're finding this. There's a lot of resources that are competing for time in high school. So that's part one. I think part two is that there's still a limited amount of time during the day that you can get in. And so when I think principals are trying to decide between which supports that they're going to do, or the district's trying to decide like where are the places that we can push in more. I think that's the interesting conundrum that the district has, is like with your limited amount of time and resources and money, how do you make your decisions that are going to be best for students? I know as much as I've seen, CPS has tried to put some of that onus on principals to be able to have that autonomy to decide what it is that they want to do. Because we actually have a model within CPS where we will support 8 schools a little bit deeper. So we do general professional development for the advisory champions, which is the teacher, basically the lead teacher for advisory. They come back and bring best practices. We do professional development on social emotional learning. But then we have room for up to 8 schools, 4 elementary schools and 4 high schools, to help support principal and initiatives for social emotional learning. And they get a free coach once a week. Indy's actually one of our coaches, so you can ask him more about what his experience has been like. And they get the materials, like it's at no cost to the principal, but at the end of the day, it's do they have time to prioritize something? Because you don't want to start something and then teachers, it buys into that narrative, like here's just one more initiative that's going to get put on the wayside. So the time is a big barrier for me.
So is all the professional development in addition to their duties, or is it part of their job description?
It could be part of it, depending on how the principal wants to approach it. So some principals, they have a core team and they're just making their professional development part of the required staff meeting. So it's already within the contract. The idea is you have to get a core group of teachers or group to be interested in rolling out the initiative. So it has to be an administrator, and if there's only one principal, that it's a smaller school and there's only one principal, that principal's already tapped. They don't have any extra support. So then you also have a smaller subset of teachers. So if you have a subset of teachers that's pre-K through 8th or 6th grade and there's only 2 teachers per grade, you have some teachers that are naturally able, for whatever reason, to step into the leadership roles, and then you'll have a subset of teachers.
You need a champion.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is just like, where are the places where we can help. So we very easily embed it into the required structure of the day. It's the creativeness of the school-based team to figure out where they can put it.
Okay, thank you. That helps. I know I didn't know any about the structure, and I don't know if any of us did, but that helps us think about stuff.
Okay. So are you currently in, what high school are you currently in right now?
What high schools are we currently in? I should know this off the top of my head. We are supposed to be in 2 more high schools. We are still waiting from approval from the district, so I don't want to release their names in case they won't.
Okay.
But the way that CPS is currently defining high schools is anyone that has 7-8. So as long as we put our resources, because it's a big focus for CPS right now to give a lot of the resources to 7-8. So in defining with 7-8, we are in Hartwell, focused on their 7-8. We are in Academy of Multilingual Immersion Studies at their 7-8, and then we're into elementary schools. And we have our last 3 schools that we're waiting on. It's just because there's so many resources for the district, and the way the district is switching their evaluation system, they had to streamline the number of resources that schools were getting so they could actually measure what was making a difference. Yeah, because I mean, if you throw everything in the pot, you're never going to know what's making the difference. Right. So they're trying to get a little bit more strategic about all the resources. So our last 3 are supposed to be high schools. We're waiting to make sure that it's the right fit, which is always a hard place because we just want to get in and help.
Following up on the earlier question, I think I might have missed it. What percentage of the programming is embedded in the courses that are already done, but it's just how you speak those topics differently, and what percentage to the students is the new material that they wouldn't?
Oh yeah, so within CPS or just in general?
Just in general.
So I would say it's probably about 50. Gosh, no. I say in the beginning it's a little bit more explicit teaching of the character strengths because the less teachers know about the strengths and less practice teachers are using, the less likely it's going to be embedded into their day. I would say like after that initial quarter and teachers start feeling comfortable and students start feeling comfortable, it should be more, it just happens naturally throughout the day. So explicit teaching would be a very small portion. We say about anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour a week of explicit teaching, but if you embed it into your curriculum, like when you're identifying characters and identifying the character strengths, you're embedding it into their PBIS systems and helping them use it as they navigate life, it should just become pervasive in the culture. And that's where we've seen it work best. Schools that approach it as this is a class and then we're done, and we're now to the point where we can actually be specific about the people that we take on. So one school wanted to do it, and I said maybe this just isn't the year for you.
right? I mean, like, I'm happy to do it. You can throw money at the issue, but if you're not committed to making a difference in the way that we've seen it make a difference the past 6 years, then we're all wasting our time and money, which
So
is my
then
least
how does
favorite thing
someone
to do.
champion it for their school? And I'm going to say specifically for Norwood, since we're such
Yeah.
a weird little different thing.
Yeah.
But like, how then do we get it at our school?
Yeah, so what we do is we either can do customized professional learning for the district. So, for example, Mount Healthy High School is coming in. We're still in the middle of getting them on board because they just got their grant funding in, blah, blah, blah. So we did a small cohort of teachers and administrators 2 weeks ago, and then we're coming back and training the whole entire high school staff.
So you guys just get hired by the board?
We get hired by whoever, I guess this time we were hired by central office.
Whoever can pay the bill?
Yeah, who can pay the bill. Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and so it just depends on how the decisions get made in a local school district, who gets to make the decision. Some schools just bring us on because we work through the High Schools at Work network, and they have money allocated toward professional development. So they use that money for professional development. They find different money. A lot of our stuff fits under Title IV dollars, which is really nice for schools. I wish I knew. It is like focused on, no, it's okay. No, Title IV is more focused on like professional development and things that have to do with social and emotional learning. I bet you came from Gianni's table. I'm sure Julie knows what Title IV is.
Julie can probably like recite the whole
But
lot.
I think because our professional development is focused on social and emotional learning, a lot of Title IV dollars can be used for us.
So if they're not already spoken to, that's something you
more about.
Yeah, and you can just say, so we spent our Title IV dollars. I have an idea.
Thriving Learning Communities.
Thriving Learning Communities.
It's an initiative of Mayerson Academy.
So we raised about 22.5
But it's Title IV, is it a state or federal?
We can Google it.
I'm the person that gets sent out in the field. I do a lot of the
I'm not just looking at
the old Google.
Yeah.
So one question I have while we're looking for that is, you said something about diversity lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So they realized that they had a need for diversity lessons within the advisory programming, and as you heard with the bigger panel, there is not a lot of diversity coming into education in general. And then, this is my personal opinion, this is not a Mayerson Academy, so this is just
Marisa Rowley.
Is that the particular people that were writing the lessons, their positions were yearly positions, and oftentimes people who come with diverse identity markers can't take positions that are only good for a year. So the four of them are very homogeneous in terms of their experiences, and they have the ability to be okay if they don't have a job next year. So CPS realized that, and they reached out to someone who I've actually done professional learning in diversity, equity, and inclusion, have done it in my classroom. So they're like, well, can you please help us tackle what this could look like? And so what I did is I reached out to teachers within the district. I reached out to the diversity, I don't know what they call it within CPS, but I reached out to a couple people on their diversity group to say, what are the things that are coming up that you wish got identified within the school or got taught a little bit more explicitly. And so with their help, we kind of created a couple of lessons just to help them understand like what diversity can look like. And it was always an interesting challenge because CPS schools as a whole are very diverse, but sometimes when you get to those local schools, they're not as diverse in lots of different ways, right? Especially neighborhood schools where kids are coming from a lot of the same experiences, whether, it's Evanston or whether it's Kilgore. Like they each sixth graders have a limited understanding what diversity can and should look like. So
Are we talking about the diversity of the staff or the student?
But I think both. I'm having worked all over the state and all over the country. CPS is very fortunate to actually have as diverse a staff as it does. In Youngstown City Schools, where students are probably 90 to 95% black or brown, when we've gone up there to do professional development for 5 different schools, I want to say less than 3 teachers are teachers that look like the kids. And so when I come here, most of them are women, most of them are white. And so to come here and see there's diversity, I mean, there's always room for improvement, but thankfully CPS is ahead of the game, especially as someone who has a kid in the district.
So have you ever thought about, or has the conversation ever come up? There is something that's called the privilege walk.
Mm-hmm.
Has that ever come up in any of the discussions around diversity? The reason why I'm asking this question because I'm in CPS. as a mentor, and I see that there are barriers with the teachers and the students that they're teaching, that they're instructing, so that they understand some of the gaps and the barriers that these kids are experiencing, and even the parents.
Yeah.
So that's why I just when you said about diversity, that I'm a walk.
I think there's always more room to be done, because I think diversity is not something as a one and done. I think it's something that's ongoing. This is my personal stance on it. Diversity, equity, inclusion is something that you consistently come back to and talk about, particularly if you come from a place of privilege, right? And I think even in general of any teacher, regardless of what you look like or your background, because you've been afforded the opportunity to go to a college and you have a job, you're come from a place of privilege regardless of what you look like. And so if you're not tackling even your own privilege, even if you look like the kids.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, I could go on for days about that.
Marisa coached teachers for many, many years. And led the summer professional development of like at least 30 teachers and like 30 new teachers every summer. And then when you were at Institute, it was like how many students? Like
too many,
hundreds. So she got a whole like and then outside of Mayerson.
Part of my I'm a certified.
real-time
teacher coach.
Yes.
I'm a certified real-time teacher coach, and what that was is doing short cycle coaching with teachers and oftentimes helping them find patterns of what things they were struggling with. And as you can imagine, sometimes coming up, a younger white person who has never been in a low-income community before, as well-meaning as they can be, they still have patterns of oppression that come up. And so to be able to have those conversations and then still end the 20 minutes where they still want to work for you is always an interesting place.
Right, exactly.
She would, like, and if you've never seen real-time teacher coaching, Marisa's wearing an earpiece, and the teacher has an earpiece, and she is like dictating, basically.
Yeah. And which is why I would have loved to have this language
Yes.
free
That's
in the classroom. Oh
Yes.
Real time.
You can do it whenever you want.
No, like in a classroom.
In the classroom.
She made a lot of friends doing that.
So you're pointing out instances where they are being insensitive, or they're
it could be a
positive
variety of things.
or negative.
Yeah,
right?
positive or negative. I think it's just helping a teacher. It was very strengths based, which is why I was always sad that I didn't have this.
Yeah.
Because I think with teachers, it's one of those things where we know what good teaching is, but there wasn't a clear cut way to explain that feeling kids should begin. I think we're clear on content. We're clear on measures of what success looked like, but that feeling of like when a kid feels good, there weren't clear, at least for me in my educational training, there weren't clear measures like what does feeling good in the classroom feel like both for the teacher and for the student. So it was to help them understand like where are places they could bring more of what they were doing and then do less of whatever they were doing that was not creating a positive environment in the classroom. But
I've had 3 friends that were teachers, and they said the hardest thing was when they just started.
Yes.
And they weren't CPS, but they said, hey, when we were starting, I was really dying for other help. And other so I got the book learning. I got this the practical experience in the class, and I really wish I would have had more coaching and more ability on. So I don't know what we do here in particular with new teachers on the development. It sounds really
it's one of those things that the teacher who's getting the real-time coaching has to be open to it, because it's not going to if they just take their earpiece out of the ear, there's really no point for me being there. And it is short cycle coaching, which I believe in is like give someone something small to work on, let them practice it. It's just like how we do good teaching for students. Like you're not going to give them all of Algebra 1 in 1 week. That just
and then feedback has to be quick.
Yes. It's quick, and then I come back and I would give feedback on it. So that's how I would do it. I really wish I would have had this language when I was back in the day.
It's fantastic.
A question for you, Sonia. You were saying that Braven supports first-generation students and students who want to get into the workforce from college. And Lindy had mentioned earlier that I think it was Lindy who said it, that our way of grading schools to create failing schools is there to create failing schools. And that's here in CPS, but nationwide there are school systems that are set up to make their students fail. And then once they get into college, you have that whole, I think you spoke to remediation earlier, so you have all of that. So if getting into college you need remediated courses, they may be around between 20 to 40% of graduation rates, but if they already come in prepared for college, then you see 70, 80, 90% graduation rates. How do you feel that gap? There's that gap in between.
I don't know that I'm an expert in that, but I will tell you what, for our students who are 90% people of color, 66% are on Pell Grants, and then like 59% are first in their family to go to college. Most of them are going to be in college for 6 years. And part of that is because either they transferred from a community college and we're working with them in their third year, or they have other responsibilities, so taking a full course load every semester to be able to get out on time, it just doesn't work. And so what I would say is that the things that we have seen, our students persist at a 95% persistence rate. And it's a happy byproduct of our course, but we think that happens for a couple of reasons. And that's what I would say that we need to invest in the early years for students once they get to a 4-year university, which is cohorts, small groups, 5 to 8 students. So our course there's 200 students that semester, but you're in a 5 to 8 student cohort with a leadership coach. And what that allows you to do is to build relationships with people, feel community, also have shared experiences, and to have an adult that knows what's going on with you and can follow up with you. And so our leadership coaches are volunteer professionals from the workforce that are working with students. And so we're not only growing their network, but they're building relationships with their students. They're flagging that for people like us. If there's something going on, we're able to share that with advisors that we work with at the college. And so I think so, yeah. And I think that there's if you think about all the things that are bombarding you when you're a college student and this huge investment you've made in your education, especially if you're from a low-income background, that there's a vision for the future, and I feel like I'm on the path and I have people who are going to be on the path with me. That synergy is something that when you're having that feeling of man, I don't know if I can do this anymore, that stops it. So I think it is. It's not scientifically proven for us yet, but we did have Harvard do a study on our program. We're just finished up a study with Stanford on what we're doing, and we did find that idea of social capital and relationship that in the cohort model is having a positive effect on our students, and so we're hoping that we can do an even larger one because it's small, a couple hundred students that they looked at. But I think that is part of retaining students in college, is having that cohort structure. I also think that, and this is something I shared with the responsibility for secondary school educators in ensuring that students that we're talking about college and that we're not quick to write off college for some students. And so what you might have heard when you said that you guys were loud, it was my controversial statement at the end. And I'm going to say it again because the woman who founded Braven is Ami Eubanks Davis, and she's an African-American woman who grew up on the south side of Chicago. She led human capital at Teach for America for a long time, and then realized that a lot of her former students that she had taught in pre-Katrina New Orleans were going to universities and then not getting jobs or not making it over Teach for America's admissions bar, which TFA's
system I had in mind when I taught.
Yeah, oh really? Yeah. Yes. So TFA admissions bar, when this is at the height in the early 2000s, when 50,000 people were applying to the Corps, it was based off of what your Fortune 500 companies were looking for. And so there's no reason that bright students from our lowest income districts that have made it and have been told that you go to college, that you get a career, shouldn't be able to, that you go to college and you're able to live the American dream, shouldn't be able to access it. And so that light bulb went off in Ami's head, and she started Braven as a project to build the confidence, which is all the things that Marissa's talking about, the skills, the hard skills that you need, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, all these things that if you're in an honors program in your college or you're in the business school, someone's going to make you take a class to do that. But if you're in College of Arts and Sciences, or if you're, no one's doing that, or you have to seek it out yourself. It's not a required part of your courses, so you have to go to the Career Center, etc. All to say, Ami created this organization for that, and she was recently on a panel, and someone said, well, we've heard a lot about the 4-year college degree isn't really necessary anymore. There's so many different avenues. You can go learn a trade, you can go to community college. And what she said, and I will repeat today, is that for her 3 children, she still wants them to go to college. And she said, as long as middle class and higher income folks are sending their kids to college, there's a value in a 4-year degree. And often we are lowering the bar and when we say there are other options and not everybody has to go to college, who are those students that we are saying don't have to go to college? And so that's what I would say is like that we can do in the K-12 sector is still like set the expectation that like our students, yes, some will choose to go a different path, and that's fine, but like let's make sure that they have the choice to go to a four-year university. And then when they get there, that they have the structures, the cohorts, and the experiences to be able to thrive after college and get a strong job.
So just a comment and a question. My comment is, like, so my wife went to Carnegie Mellon. If you look at Harvard, for instance, there is no 6-year program at Harvard.
Yeah.
There is a 4-year program at Harvard that is all intensive in. And are they removing some of their applicants that they could have had if they would have had a longer program? So it's a little bit ironic that they would be. The other thing that I would ask is on your program, and a lot of times I hear like really good results with programs, and I wonder, hey, from a statistical standpoint, is it like how significant actually is? Is it the fact that kids really like that want to opt in happen to do better, or is it
like are we creams like skimming like that's like yeah?
So I mean, is there like a sample of some people who don't get in and do get in, and you track both cohorts through, and you're like, yeah, these are the pieces of our program that are really working, or you know, here's what we're doing. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's actually a question we get a lot. It's partially why we choose to work at not in like Ivies or with all like student success organizations. Why we're not an extension of KIPP. And what we do is, so to answer the first part of your question, part of the Stupski Stanford research I'm talking about is there's a control group, and so the results are coming out like next week. So I don't have them for you today. The preliminary results are good, but what our course is open to every single person at the university. So there is no admissions requirements, open enrollment. You just have to have 3 credits in your system, like available. And there's not really an application. You go on our website and you sign up. It's like a profile, so we can match you in a cohort, but that's it. And so we do that purposefully because we target, when we're talking about like building relationships with advisors and programs, students that are going to be first gen, or that's why we're not 100% first gen, et cetera, because we have to be an open, we're of course a public university, have to be open to everybody. So we don't do like the cream skimming or like the MLT where there's like, and I'm not trying to be rude, MLT is a great program, but like you have to be the cream of the crop to like to get in there. You have to have certain leadership things in order to be part of MLT, et cetera. We want to prove that it can be systemic solution, and our vision is that like 100,000 like young people in college are in the Braven course. And are able to land a strong first job. To date, so like we've had, our largest class of about 300 graduates to date just graduated in May, because we work with sophomores, so you have to think like it's like our results are a little bit later. But our 3 years before that, we've had cumulatively about 350 grads, and then we have another 300 grads, so we'll have 600 grads at this year's 6-month mark. But for our graduates, 69% landed a strong job within 6 months, which you might be like, that doesn't sound very great. But let me just, the national, what are we looking at? Yeah. So nationally, students from public universities, only 54% have a strong job within 6 months. That's every, like, high income, middle income, white, black, people of color. And then when you actually look at their peer group, so when you look at Latinx and African American students from public universities within 6 months, it's only 46% that have a strong first job. So we're outpacing that by 23 percentage points. I think we would hope, we're only in year 6, but year 10 to have like we'd like to have, it's RCT, like a random controlled trial, so that we can actually like prove that. And so we're launching in the Bronx with Lehman College. It's one of the CUNY colleges, and part of that is in the deal that we wrapped up with them, that they'll give us a research team to do what you're talking about when we hit the 10-year mark, so that we can then really speak to the results, see what's working, and then just scale.
I can't tell you how many times I read about different studies or different things, and I get excited, and then I'm like, what was the control group? Like,
yeah. So we're trying that. I mean, we have a really stellar, she's 26 years old, so I'm always like, man, you're amazing, data analyst on our team that did Education Pioneers and is always thinking about like what's like, we don't put a data point out unless it has a good like counterpoint that we're like comparison point. Like she won't let us publish anything. She's like, nah, I'm not feeling confident about that one. Like this is only like this many people. We have to put the end, we have to say, et cetera. But in our last Post-Accelerator Fellow survey, we had like 48% of our graduates are actually out earning their parents in their first job out of college. And in comparison, Americans by age 30, you only have a 50-50 chance of out earning your parents today.
And that
which
was
is
like the point of going to college.
Right.
Coming from a low income
Right.
family was like, I don't want to live this life.
It's a quiet crisis. Our CEO says we have a quiet crisis on our hands where like we've been promised that through the doors of colleges lives the American dream. And like if you are a student from a low income background or a student of color in this country, that is not exactly true. But it doesn't have to be that way. She says like there is it's really solvable though. Like we're proving that it's solvable, and we just actually need universities, our corporations, and like nonprofits to like ensure that we are giving students the networks, because again, that referral, that networks.
An adult that like is informed about what's happening in your life, like that sentence just like stuck in my mind. I'm like, what do you like? How impactful would that be if you have an adult who cares and knows?
Well, yeah, and so many of our like you should on our website, if you go to bebraven.org, there's a video of Crystal, and maybe at lunch I can play it or something, because I love to tell the story of Braven, but it's so much better when it comes from our fellows. But thanks.
When Sonia's done, we're gonna wrap it up.
I feel like that sentence comes out a lot when Sonia's done. But like Crystal, I love Crystal. I've gotten to know Crystal. She was a student at San Jose State. She graduated last year. But Crystal's family is immigrants from Mexico. Her dad, she opens the video by talking about, my dad said I work with my hands so you can work with your mind. And so she talks about growing up as an immigrant like in California and what her parents' dream was for her to go to college. And she got to college and she realized she was like nailing academics, and then she had a friend who said like, well, you got to start networking, Crystal, like you got to get a job. And Crystal's like, well, I don't even know where to start, because for her network was they're farmers. And she was like, I don't know anyone in San Francisco, this is like the Bay Area, it's like the hub of tech, but like I don't know anybody. And so then a friend told her about her. She talks about having her leadership coach, and she now works for Box, which is like it's like a digital company. It's an awesome company, but like, and she's leading all kinds of stuff there. But like for her, all it took was that leadership coach, and like getting plugged in there. She got to be part of a fellowship with them through someone at Braven, and like now she came back and she's a leadership coach. So it's like full circle. But anyway, watch the video. Sorry.
Introduce, and we've already met some of you, but just really quick, like why you're here, who you are, what you do.
You start.
I'm Rhonda Thomas. I run a nonprofit organization called Unite Your Purpose, and I do mentoring and professional development within CPS and in the greater Cincinnati area. Why am I here? I want to help implement positive change for our children and the communities that we all live in, so that everyone has the opportunity to have a great life and experience life at its fullest. Really.
Great. I'm Jonathan Hay. I'm a business analyst at Procter & Gamble. I would say I have a very similar.
Yeah, I know. That was it?
Yes.
Oh.
I thought that was a sidebar conversation or something. Dorica Bonds. I'm a real estate agent, and I'm here because I believe in the school board school whole idea theory, and I want to make it a success.
I'm Jessica Moore, and I get very overwhelmed about the national climate of things, and I'm not sure like what to do there. So sort of my strategy has been help your neighbor, and so really that doesn't narrow down who I think is my neighbor, but I feel like this is a good way to get to know my neighborhood since I'm not from here, and then help.
So you know me, I'm Leah. You know what I do at UC. Before we came to Cincinnati and I started working at UC, at my last institution, I was the director of field placement and licensure. So I was our partnership person with all of our districts and school partners. So I worked with 18 school districts and about 50 schools. And then prior to that, I worked as a public school teacher in both Minnesota, where I'm from, and in Louisiana.
Hey everybody, I'm Ben. I shared earlier that I'm a candidate for school board on leave as executive director from Teach for America. The things I didn't share earlier is that I'm from Cincinnati, grew up here. I graduated from Cincinnati Public Schools. I'm a dad to a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old who will both be Cincinnati Public School students. And I've been an educator for the last 15 years. Started as a public school teacher through law school to the DC public schools where I was in charge of teacher hiring. And then most recently back home in Cincinnati for about 8 years. I'm excited to talk with you all.
And I'm Julie Sellers, and I'm the president of the Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. This is my 11th year, my 6th term elected. I've been in CPS for over 30 years. My children went to CPS. They graduated from CPS. One teaches in CPS. I graduated from CPS, and I have granddaughters in CPS. So it's kind of a CPS family thing, and we work every day to try to improve working conditions in every CPS school.
All right, you guys have questions? We're ready.
So, Julie, I want to ask you a question in regards to creating a pipeline for children that are currently in high school for getting into teaching positions. What do we need to do to navigate that?
We used to have a teaching program at Hughes, and it was closed when they went to STEM. I think that it's necessary that we still have that. I know I've been working with the district to have a career tech program that students can graduate with an early childhood certificate, and then that would have an articulation agreement for they could work in early childhood centers, and then have an articulation agreement with the universities that they can either go to an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree to become a licensed teacher, because I think that wherever you are working in early childhood, you should have a pathway that you can move up and expand your career. I know that in the past we had a great working program with UC, and it was an internship. It was a 5-year internship for teachers. I think that we could get it down to the 4 years, because a lot of students didn't want to do that 5th year. But I think with College Credit Plus, they could get at least a year under their belt and then still have graduate in the 4 years with doing a year-long internship. The teachers who were in that program are still many of our very strongest teachers. Many of them are in teacher leadership programs. They are in administration now. That program kind of fizzled out because we had all these great teachers who were doing year-long internships, and then we were on hiring freezes. And so they were not, we weren't able to hire them after they put in all this time. And so we even had it worked out where during that year of internship, they made a half of a teacher's salary. So they weren't, it wasn't like just doing your regular student teaching where you work for free. Right. It was like an internship that industry would have. And I think that right now we're in an area where we need to go back to that. But we also had a very strong program, and it was with Miami University. It wasn't for any one individual high school. And it was where the counselors were recruiting students through letters of recommendation to get into the program. And it was really truly for minority hiring. And so those students were going through cohorts with Miami University and getting out with their teaching license. And we had way more teacher diversity back in the 90s, and a lot of it was through that program. But I think that as fields opened up for more recruitment, heavy recruitments into other areas, a lot of minorities were recruited in other pathways and not through education. I believe that Cincinnati Public Schools, our students are needed to be teachers in our district. They are from our district, they understand our district, they understand the culture of our district, and I think that we need our students to be teachers in our district. And so I think we need to go back to where we are recruiting students in high school to go in that teacher pipeline, because you cannot wait until they are in college and then try to recruit them when they're a junior or a senior. It's just, you know, they're not going into sometimes the teacher profession at the numbers that we need. I also think that we need to do more I think if we have more students who were CPS students who are becoming teachers, they may have that sense of loyalty for the district that's stronger than kids who are graduating from the suburbs. We have, if you go over in either one of these classrooms where they're doing the managing behavior, the math course, those are almost all CPS graduates who are teaching those courses, and they are now national trainers for AFT, and they can train people anywhere in the country. And so it's through those types of programs. So those teachers are teaching other teachers, but then they are also still in the classroom and they're becoming stronger teachers. And then that makes their building a stronger building.
And the reason why I asked that question, because I'm a product of Hughes. So when we had the health professions, we had communication, we had the Paideia. So I came from that, and my background was communications. So my whole life,
Did you have Gene Calvin?
I sure did. I sure did.
Did you love him?
Yes. And then so even in the health professions or the teaching professions, we go back to that one. Carlos Blair was one of the students that was in the teaching, and now he's a principal at one of the CPS schools. So that's why I asked that question, because my kids are at Hughes now, but they don't have that same luxury that I had going into the school to be in a curriculum that would put me in a good job when I graduate, or I further me to college if I decided to do that. So that just made me ask you that question because of that reason.
But I think there are a lot of different ways that we can start earlier and get more identification of students. And actually, I think that we could, because if we keep some kids, identify them, keep them local, we can then still have a better support system for them, as a lot of them may be first-gen students, but they don't need to be living in a first-gen house with other first-gen students. I'm totally against that, because they're not meeting and networking like the students who are living other housing. But I think it's a stigma, and I don't think that that's right for those students. But they're also not getting the opportunities to network with the people who might have their dad who will hire them, or they don't. I mean, I just think that it's a way to concentrate services where they need to be out in all of these other living environments, and then still have a place where they can come for the supports that they need to be successful.
During the panel discussion, Ben, you stated that for teachers to be a good teacher, they need evidence that the children are learning. Keeping that in mind, and then I don't remember if it was just a statement or a consensus, but it also came out that our children are over-tested as well. How do you propose being able to track and show, to produce that evidence that the children are learning? And then I would like for you to follow up, Leah, and inform that answer with what would be needed in order to make sure that they can go ahead and get into secondary education, the type of evidence you would need to see, so it can be congruent with that, since Cincinnati's public thing is to enlist, enroll, or employ. And then you mentioned in the panel discussion that policy impacts classrooms. So it's going to come back down to the teachers to go ahead and implement it, so then you follow up afterwards to see what we can, propose, come up with, or whatever, because that was kind of vague and broad. It can be taken a whole bunch of different ways, but I'm sure you had something in mind.
It's a super inclusive question, Dorica, because you give all of us a chance to respond to it.
Yes.
So thank you. I think that's great. Yeah. And I think I may have actually said both of those things about needing to have some evidence that students are learning and this real concern about over-testing. I think both those things are 100% true. You were asking, what do you do about it? Is that right?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the lens of a school district, I think what I would be looking for, and would welcome other opinions too, is how do you find the minimal amount of testing you need to do what testing is good for. Like that's the way I would approach it. And so what do you need testing to do? I think it should be helpful for teachers so that you can get a sense of what are your kids learning well, where do they have gaps. Are those gaps where every student in the classroom missed this learning standard, or 80% of them did? Or is it an issue where, oh gosh, 90% of the kids are doing great, but these 10% of kids are missing a whole bunch of things? You know, like those would lead you as a teacher in different directions.
Okay, and just so I can interject on that, with that answer, you had also mentioned that the whole grading system of failing schools was created to, was created to create failing schools. So in your measurements, academic-wise, but also when we looked at some stats about our local schools, all of the high schools were failing for getting Fs with having the children being prepared once they leave high school, regardless of what their academics were.
Is that, were you looking at the graduation, what were you looking at?
No, that was underneath a different rubric.
Okay.
It was like 5 or 6 different points, and being prepared for the future once you left, they all had Fs, but they had different grades for all the other things. So it's
prepared for success.
Yeah.
Was that the
success
one
and academics, because I don't just want you to focus on the academics, since it's going to transition all the way around, and the schools are being graded on all levels as well.
Yeah. So I think I'm doing my best to answer what I think is your question, Dorita.
Yes, sir.
If I'm
Sorry.
different, no. I was going to say, like, if I'm on a different planet, will you tell me? Because I can come back to your planet. I was trying to approach this from what's the minimum amount of testing you need to get the job done. So I do think teachers need information about but I think teachers can do that on their own. Like I think good teachers do that on their own, and they don't need extra testing from the district or the school or from the state. And so the other thing I want you to be able to do is know where you have schools that are producing a counter narrative about what's possible with kids. This is one of the reasons I think it's so there are all kinds of challenges from the child left behind. I think one of the things that was important about it was it didn't just highlight gaps that exist in our education system. It helped you see schools that were showing, all kids can do it. All kids can do it. Poor kids, kids of color, rural, urban, all kids. And so I think that's why you support state testing, so that you have at the end of the year information both about where you have equity gaps and also schools that are telling a different story. And there's some schools in CPS doing that. I mean, Evanston Academy just got an A on the state report card, even though it's almost all low-income kids. So tactically, I'd support some form of state testing to do those things. And then as little extra testing on top of that as possible to make sure the teachers can use it to inform their instruction. So is that the right planet, or was that?
Yeah, sure. Right.
You sure?
Yeah, you're there.
Okay.
And then I think your question for me was from the university lens, how that, if we change that mindset, how that translate into transitioning into the post-secondary world. I think that's where the pendulum is swinging at the university level too. All across the nation, you see graduate programs dropping the GRE as a requirement. You see undergraduate programs going test optional. We at UC are looking at holistic admission, so we know you're not defined by your ACT score or your high school GPA, because a lot of those are highly correlated with where you went to school. And so we're working really closely with our admissions office to define what does potential for success in this career field look like. So IT is in my college, for example, and so ACT score and GPA doesn't necessarily translate to success in the IT field. What are the types of things that are? And then we're trying to backfill that and say, then how do we help all students get those opportunities? So just one example, we started an early IT program at a lot of CPS schools where we're in the schools training teachers to teach those computer science and coding classes, and students earn their first year of college while in their high school, and if they get a C average or better, they're automatically admitted to UC, no ACT, nothing, and then they're sophomores. And so I think that testing pendulum is swinging in the higher ed realm too, so I don't see it having any negative. Actually, I think it might help improve access overall in the higher ed realm.
And I'm not exactly sure what my question was. Was it about the report card and the testing? I totally agree with Ben, there's way too much testing. But the problem with the testing is schools are not teaching full content-rich curriculum. They're teaching what's tested. And so you have gaps in what kids are learning, and some of those are the most critical skills that they need to know in order to do well in life. And so it really bothers me that the over-reliance on testing is really narrowing the curriculum, that students aren't getting that full, rich curriculum. And the more schools are looked at as a failing school, the more that is happening with those kids. So I feel like then kids are getting a more limited education on content. And for example, if we did a big study of the number of subgroups that a school has within their building, if you have a district that is pretty much middle class, no subgroups, the kids take the test, they count in one group, they're going to probably do well. But when you start having subgroups, and in some of our schools they have 5 and 6 subgroups, and there are kids who are fitting into 4 and 5 subgroups, if they miss the general overall test by even 1 point, they count 5 times for those kids. And so we have kids who are
That's interesting.
English language learners, and they barely were, and they're life students. They did not have education in the country before they came here, and they're still expected to take the test and pass the test. Well, if they don't pass the reading or the American government, then they fail it in all of those subgroups. So all of those subgroups then are negatively impacted. We have a high percentage of special needs students, and that is a subgroup in almost every school now. And the charter schools, the voucher schools, the parochial and the private schools, they have very low numbers of students who have IEPs. But if they don't pass, so if they are not really reading on grade level, they still take the test of the reading on grade level. They still have to read that passage on grade level. They don't get any assistance with the reading part of the test. They might be able to have extra time. And so we are penalizing students. We're giving them a negative impact of themselves. Mm-hmm. We are penalizing schools and putting them under this strict outside where somebody comes in from the outside to oversee what they're doing. They're limiting their education. They're not taking as many courses for enrichment. They're not taking as many electives because it gets stuck into this, I have to take that course again so that I can pass that course, that test. And when you have 5, 6, 7 tests that they have to pass for high school, and it keeps changing. It's not like when you start in 7th grade, you don't really even know what the graduation requirements are.
Why? I feel like this has been battling. Why did the state keep changing it? What's their point?
Because.
What do you think? That's a good question.
Why on earth would you change it 3 times in a year? Like that just seems like a waste of time.
Sense. And it's in conflict. It's malicious, and it's in conflict, complete conflict with the federal law that if you are a student and you have an IEP, you are entitled to be in school until you turn 22, and they get job skills. We had Project Search, which was like one of the best programs. Preparing students with special needs to go into the job force, and they count as dropouts on our graduation rate. Mm-hmm. And so people, when they start hearing all the different things that's impacting our graduation rates, it's shocking that it is 8 out of 10 kids are graduating. And so it really bothers me when we say that kids are in failing schools. I mean, you went to Hughes. Nowadays, that would have been a failing school. The people that I went to Aiken, people would say, "Oh, that's a failing school." People went to Withrow, "Oh, that's a failing school." People went to Woodward, "Oh, that's a failing school." But yet there are kids who are graduating from there who are very successful in life. And it's only sometimes kids, until they get out into the real world, they don't even know what their whole potential is. And to me, that is what's so wonderful about America, is that we are the country of second and third chances on education. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you start really thinking about why are they doing this and what is it that they're doing, and some of it's being done intentionally, And it's being done to hurt urban areas. I mean,
It definitely
it's
feels
being
that way.
done, it not only hurts, say you live in Roselawn, and before we had this testing, Roselawn was a middle-class neighborhood, and they had great houses, and people moved there because they wanted to. They started putting report card grades on schools. Roselawn Condon is over 50% IEPs with kids who are medically fragile. They have the best care in the world. They have full-time nurses there. There are kids on breathing machines. There are kids on feeding tubes, in wheelchairs. But how are they going to have the same scores as the kids who go to Kilgore, where there's no kids who are medically fragile? And so what is that? So Kilgore, their property values are going up. Roselawn, their property values are going down because the realtors are saying, oh, look at the school that your kid's going to have to go to. But Roselawn is a great school. I know teachers at Roselawn. I've been in Roselawn a lot of times. And it's because of the makeup of the students in that school. And so to me, they would never have put a school that is going to show like that on a report card in Mount Lookout or Hyde Park. What do they put in Hyde Park? How did Hyde Park get started when they were the #1 school in the state? Every one of their kids, because remember they started with kindergarten, K1, then they added 2, then they added 3. That was the first year of any testing. They were, by year 2, they were #1 in the state. But the 4, 5, 6 were only those kids who were in that gifted program that was started down at Riverview. And so the only kids on their report card score were gifted children. So how would that have changed the property values of Roselawn if Roselawn had only gifted kids on their test scores? It would have been a totally different thing. What if Kilgore had, what would happen to all of that property around Kilgore if they had over 50% of medically fragile students? Would the people still be paying those same property values for those homes? Probably not. And so it's a whole thing that it's so twisted and it's so manipulated that I tell people, go in, talk to families. Are the families happy there? Are the kids learning? Are the kids happy? Are the teachers happy? If it's a good school, teachers are going to stay there. What's the mobility rate of the teachers in that building? That should be something that's on the report card. Because if you have teachers who go to a school and they want to stay at a school and they are, good teachers, that tells you something in that school is probably going well. But that's not how the legislation has set it up.
I'll
These
share.
are good questions. And I didn't know what to prepare for today. I didn't prepare for anything. But
your life prepared you for today.
My life prepared me for today.
I'll share a slightly different perspective on the report card and the grading stuff, and I share this with you so you know where I stand, not because I'm trying to convince you. And I said this in the last session too. The wonderful thing about our democracy is you get to decide for yourselves and lead the way you want to lead. But my time as a teacher taught me that all kids, no matter what set of circumstances they're coming from, can do it. All of them. And what I think is powerful about looking at test scores is that it tells us where that's happening and where we still have a lot more work to do. And I'm not willing to take a position that the report cards show absolutely nothing. And I think failing school is not a particularly helpful term. I agree on that one.
Schools that are failing are not failing because of any reason except that they have been failed. They've been failed by how they're resourced.
And so you take CPS is so interesting because you have schools that I think Evanston is a good example of this, of a school that is a predominantly low-income school and yet did really well on all kinds of report card outcomes. Why is that? Like what's happening there that we can learn from? And so I think there is a useful distinction that I have found between the idea of fault and the idea of responsibility. where fault means you did something wrong. That's why these bad things are happening. So like it's the fault of the teachers or the fault of the school or the fault of the school district that the grades are low. I don't believe that. Like I don't think it's because of bad teachers or because of bad principals. Like people get into this profession because they love kids and they want to do something about that. But I do think responsibility can be a useful different term. This is background as a lawyer maybe. But we can say, it's not our fault that kids are coming in having heard millions of fewer words when they were young, or having not had the experiences or opportunities that we wish they'd have access to. And yet it's our responsibility as educators to say we're going to try to do something about that. And that's where I think some parts of our accountability system are really important that I would want to let go of.
How do we judge our teachers so I mean there's lots of tests for the students, but how do we think about this from a teacher perspective on how they're rewarded? How do we say, hey, who's doing a really good job? And then how do we leverage the teachers that are getting exceptional results, and maybe celebrating them and rolling out best practices out to other teachers.
Can I extend my question too? Because I would love to hear from Leah's perspective. Like, do you ever hear from the field, the teachers that are doing really well, and bring it back into your curriculum of what you're training? So
Yeah.
I haven't jumped into any groups yet.
Yeah.
I feel very honored.
So I think there's a lot of pieces there and a lot of angles I could tackle this from. I think systemically as a country, we're not very good in terms of, we don't know much about teacher evaluation and how we actually define and measure and reward based on teacher quality. We can't define it, so how can we measure and reward it? So I think as a country, we're not very good at that yet. In terms of the learning from, on a smaller scale within districts, within schools, and learning from teachers who are doing really well and sharing that best practice, I think we're better at that. And I think I'll finish up here, but you might be able to talk to some about teacher leadership. I think that's a kind of a growing movement and idea of let's learn from the expertise that lies within our teachers and have them share that with others. From the teacher ed lens, we work really closely with our partners and strong principals to identify strong mentor teachers to place our student teachers with. There's research out there that shows that if you are placed with a strong, and how you define that varies, and there's debate about that, but if you're placed with a strong mentor teacher when you're doing your student teaching, you actually leave your teacher prep program the equivalent when you look at student achievement and test scores as a third-year teacher. So there's a really strong impact about who your mentor teacher is when you're doing your student teaching. And then we also loop back and we try to bring in a lot of those really strong mentor teachers that our partner districts have identified and have them be adjunct teachers for our classes. So they might be coming in to teach methods, or they might be coming in to supervise student teachers or to teach classroom management or something like that. So we try to leverage our local expertise within our programs.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you were asking John about like teacher eval, like and how you do it. It's interesting. I have changed positions on this. I think in my career a little bit. I went to work after college, after law school for the DC Public Schools that was doing a lot of really aggressive work on teacher evaluation. And I am less convinced now than I was then that it's like an incredibly powerful lever for moving kids in the district forward. I think the things I do think are helpful. I do think it's good to look at how much learning growth kids have. Yeah. I do think it's good. I think parent-student surveys can be really interesting measures. And student surveys.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen any of the research on this, John?
No, and I don't. I've actually never witnessed a student survey, but I really think that's how students know if they're engaged in class. So
there is such a strong relationship between how students respond to a very small handful of questions and how much learning growth they get on tests. It's fascinating. Some of the questions that wind up being most predictive are things like, if I don't understand this, my teacher can explain it to me in a different way. You know, like, what a great question. You know, like I can think of all kinds of teachers I had, and like the really good ones are ones who could do that. You know, and or like
not just say it louder.
Yeah, right. Or like or assign more of it as homework.
Yeah,
you know, like and other questions. I think you should check me on this, but I think other ones are ones like I feel safe in this classroom. Or this teacher like knows something about who I am outside of school. You know, and I mean they're wonderful questions. Like the things that I don't believe as much in as I used to is the idea of using those for these like bright line high stakes decisions about like whether they're retained or how much they're paid. I think getting information on all these things is really important so you can have conversations to help people grow in their profession. I think I used to have a stronger opinion that if we could just get the evaluation stuff right, it would be like one of the most important things that we could do. And I now believe that things like having a really great principal who can build a strong culture in that school that is focused on kids and like building a strong team and developing the teachers, like I've come to believe that stuff matters more. And again, we just invite, if you have different opinions, that's cool too.
There was, in the last decade, a lot of money poured into teacher evaluation systems. You know, states were rewarded federally with money for looking at teacher evaluation and how they retained and promoted. And so the Gates Foundation put in hundreds of millions of dollars, especially with certain districts, over this. And in the last year, they've released reports that basically said they didn't move the lever. But I think what we did learn is that multiple measures are important. So you can't just look at test scores, you know, looking at surveys, you know, principal observations. So multiple measures are important. And then feedback that's actually early and actionable is really important. So if a teacher has an evaluation at the end of the year to check a box off and that you don't ever debrief about it with your principal or your mentor or something, and what good does that do? Like, especially for those early career teachers, right? Like you need someone in there early in the school year who's actually using that feedback in a meaningful way with you to intervene and to help coach you.
It's true with all learning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not groundbreaking. But that's what we learned after all those hundreds and millions of dollars being invested in these teacher evaluation systems.
I think teachers could have said, oh, that's not going to work. Teachers don't leave their best lesson plan in their back pocket until there's some sort of reward to have a better, you know, outcome on tests. What you need to do is have a strong induction program right from the very beginning, and have great PD that is content rich. You cannot expect teachers to have great math lessons if they haven't had a lot of strong PD in math, especially in the elementary schools. I know when I was a younger teacher, we had so many opportunities. Instead of spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a teacher evaluation system, tying it to some test scores that really don't even, of one day of one child's life, that are kind of crazy questions. I mean, if the regular public saw how the questions were worded, they would say, I don't even know the answer to this, because they were crazy questions most of the time. But if we spent the money on development, like I went through National Science Foundation grants at Miami University, and I went and stayed on at the geological field lab in Wyoming for Miami University, and we studied rocks, and we studied land formations, and we studied ecology, and we were there, we lived there for multiple weeks. We lived in these little bitty dorms out in the mountains, and every day we were out and we were learning this stuff. So of course we would have been better teachers. And if they would have spent the money on teacher development and content rich instruction for teachers to go deep, that would have helped. We moved to Common Core, and they didn't really even do a good job unpacking what the standards were and what they really look like. So teachers were kind of still teaching the same kind of standards because they weren't told any other way to teach those standards. We've been doing standards-based instruction since the 90s.
Do you think like change management is hard in the private sector, trying on the scale of an entire state's worth of teachers, you know, like
with bad communication?
Yeah, it's very hard.
Yeah. Well, and part of that, a few weeks ago, there was a training, and I believe it was you who stood up there, and you were talking about the collaboration agreement with the teachers. It was a blue book that you held up that had all of the...
Where was that?
It was a few weeks ago. It was over at the Union Hall in
Oh,
Evanston.
okay. Oh, were you there
Yes.
for the day?
Yeah,
Okay,
I was
great,
there.
great.
And
okay.
so she was saying in that blue book, that was the entire agreement for all the teachers
That's
and
a
the
book.
union. That right there, the collective bargaining.
Yeah.
So finance came up, policy came up, PD came up, and it's all tied into each other. And if it begins or ends or attached to the board, does the board ever see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Like-
sign off on it, they vote on it, they approve every single line of it. This is between the Board of Education and the teachers. It's Cincinnati Board of Education and CPS and the teachers.
Okay.
It's and then administration's job is to implement it.
Correct. Well, not only that as being the end all be all, but my thinking is it all waterfalls down. So if that's part of it and you're saying, hey, we need more money, and the board's responsibility, if it's not about the money, the allocation of money, they're focused on finance and student achievement. You're saying a teacher's teaching condition is a student's learning condition. If part of that needs to be professional development, how do we put that in there to make sure that the asks are there, just like how they review policies constantly for the board?
We
A
have,
reviewing of
we
that,
have
so
a
we
great
can constantly
induction program in
tweak it
here.
for what Leah was
Right.
talking about. If the pendulum is
Yep.
swinging this way, we need to swing possibly
Yeah.
everything that way.
And,
so.
and this changes every 3 years.
Sure.
And
But
so,
does that line up with the contracts where you're talking about finance too? You said there is no standard for teacher evaluation, but if the teachers come up to have their contract renewed right before the budget comes out, and then there's less that we can do, I'm thinking of the whole balancing act without knowing the whole balancing act.
right. The teacher evaluation is, the guidelines are there so that we know what the guidelines are.
Okay.
So that that you have to have fairness from school to school to school.
Yeah, but I was saying it is defined. What I was saying is the collective we in the United States here, education policy, we don't know a lot about it yet. We're not very good at it yet.
But because of Race to the Top, we are all under the OTES model. And so
what's that?
That is the Ohio Teacher Evaluation System.
Okay.
To me, from what we had prior to the state telling us what our evaluation system was gonna look like, we had a stronger evaluation system. The evidence, the rubric was stronger, and it was all based on evidence. There is a rubric now, but it's squishy. And so to me, I felt like they were trying to model the state's evaluation system around Cincinnati's evaluation system because we had a long history of a strong evaluation system. But when they redid it and redid the rubric, it kind of watered down because they were going to take it statewide, and so then we were still under that watered down model. Our old model, I thought, was a better model.
I have a couple more people who are just going to be coming in. We're rounding up from the other room.
Just a
Yes.
you have a card.
They didn't even have teachers.
So thank you all today. These were some really great conversations. I mean, y'all are tackling some huge topics. So thank you. And to our guests, I will say I have never had this many of our classmates come up to me during break saying, this session is fantastic. These people are so knowledgeable. I can't believe I'm meeting so-and-so. So to our guests, thank you for spending your time with us. Really, we've just learned so much. So during our group debrief time, I wanted to keep our guests here because I do want to just kind of hear from everybody. Just some of the thoughts that are top of mind for you. Maybe something that surprised you, something you learned today, something you're going to take away. Like what's one thing, guests or our participants, what's one thing you're going to take away from one of the conversations we had? Just 3 different ideas, or none of those things, something else that's top of mind for you. Or just to hear something that you learned. Yes, Gay.
I just want to say that, Cincinnati is a big city but a very small town. So you come together in a group like this, and all of a sudden, somebody says one thing, and then you connect up with that person, and somebody says something else. And before you know it, the connections are there, and it's the one-to-one, and that's what going forward to me and progress is all about, is the people making the connections. And I just see it in this group today. Well, I've seen it in every session we've had, but particularly this one, it just seemed like there was just a spark, going, and I like that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Someone else, something something that you learned, something you're taking away from today?
Did you remember the extremely inspirational thing that Marika said earlier that I forgot? Did you remember? Did she say
That's not my words.
Being human shouldn't be uncommon, or it shouldn't be uncommon to be human. Something
That was
like
exactly what it was. We were going to trademark it.
Yes. And that was in our conversation about part of this, all of the work we do in school, but especially today, is also being vulnerable, right? Being vulnerable in lots of ways, but I don't know everything. Or, something I held fast to, someone said something today that made me have to let that go, and that's an uncomfortable place to be in, but we also know that's where learning happens, right, is when you let that go. And so that's part of being human. And we were talking about how there's not a ton of spaces, especially as adults, where you're allowed to be that vulnerable. And so we loved that wisdom from our classmate. Yes?
I didn't know what to expect. From this session, to be honest. I was excited because I thought, we got some very, thinking about the panel, it could be very polarized because you all are impacting the system from very different approaches. And so I thought, this could be really fun, but to see, especially with the reading, I just feel like there's so much collaboration that's already happening. To your point, Gay, I think it's about us aligning more. But there's room for everyone to collaborate and build on the strengths of the other. And I think this went a lot more peacefully, and it was more inspiring for me to hear from these leaders who are serving in different capacities talk about collaboration and talking about, okay, what's working there, we could adopt it here. That was really inspiring for me. Because it's always so politicized and siloed, but I didn't feel that today in this experience, so that was helpful.
That's wonderful. Yes.
Something I shared with Elisa that I picked up on, and I just want to make it intentional as far as the teacher and me. And some of you may not decide to be on a board, but a board is this. Different ideas, different perspectives, and coming together to make a decision, to decide on the policy, even though it has come from different places, different ideas, and we are on polar opposite ends. You will have to be able to be in a room and speak professionally, argue your point. Discourse is amazing and should be expected. As a principal, it's the same thing. When I deal with teachers, they are different ways to get to our vision. So that's what I shared earlier. That's what I noticed. I think it's I don't know if it was intentionally done, but this is a skill that we all need to develop and have, because most of the time you're going to be in a position where the person next to you doesn't think like you or have a different idea than you, and it's okay.
Along those lines, what Amber and Tiana were saying, when I did the reading, the pre-work, it just seemed like it was all doom and gloom. And it was like, they say this about CPS, and we're gonna get there, and maybe some fireworks, maybe not. Didn't know if I was gonna throw in a firecracker or not, but then get here and hear everything come out from those who are in the field, being on the outside, looking in. We're not that far apart. We're doing a lot better than everything that we've read. And so it's good to know what's going on out there. One, to know that it's out there, and two, to help us identify it and recognize it within ourselves. But then we can also pat ourselves on the back and love ourselves and know that we're really not in those situations. It don't necessarily apply in that way or fully. And we're doing a lot better comparatively than a lot of other people. And our distance apart isn't that big. And a lot of the way to bridge that gap may be what Brian was saying to us at lunch, just because when you're in the different individual settings, having these conversations, everybody is pretty much saying the same thing. How do we get these conversations together so that we can have that collective conversation and make it happen? Because I think we all want to, and we all know how to. We, for whatever reasons, whatever those reasons are, we just haven't done it yet. But it is definitely possible here.
You just sparked a memory in me. I was really struggling with getting the homework done for this one, and not because it was more, because it was whatever, but I just told my husband, I'm just reading about how bad things are, about how stressful everything is, and then we go into a session, it's like, what can we do about it? I don't know, it's gonna be hard. And so I feel like, you know, seeing everyone doing different things from different like aspects and coming in from different ways and like collaborating even if you're not agreeing, like I think this has been like maybe the most uplifting since the why, you know, like that was like a sort of a rah-rah for us, and then again to say like, oh, things are moving, things are happening, because the readings might say otherwise.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think that some of the conversations definitely reinforce the systems change stuff we were talking about. Mainly, there was one where we were talking about school integration and success, how that has to do with affordable housing, like directly has to do with affordable housing, and how it's difficult to solve one problem when there's this other thing looming. And so yeah, I think the importance of being well-rounded in your approach and understanding how issues are talking to each other. I mean, everyone's coming from vastly different perspectives, and that's where maybe these conversations are really useful, because it's like, oh, I maybe never would have thought about it that way, made that connection with whether it's, you know, housing or transportation or whatever, these issues that aren't directly educational. I think that's where meetings like this are especially important.
Anything else top of mind? And I think even just as Gus is talking about the system stuff, as I was sitting in these conversations, I heard lots of times our guests talking about, you know, when we learned about the systems iceberg, that lots of times we're just looking at the tip, right? Like, what do we see? We're not looking at what is the system level issue. And so that was really interesting for me anyway, was to hear our guests talking about how they are attacking the systems level problem, not just trying to get out of what you can see above the waterline.
And I would say, I think we all, wherever we are now and wherever we end up, have to remember that if we're really trying to make these transformational societal changes to dismantle things that have taken hundreds of years to put together, that this is a long game, that there are, we can have wins along the way to show progress, but that we're committed to doing things that is hard work with people we don't like or people we don't agree with.
She's not pointing at Brenda.
Right there. Focus here. Look at her.
She was pointing at you.
There's a general movement. Bring us full circle.
I'll keep my hand
In general, we may not like
But then you have to be committed, you know, to a long process that will have results, but you may not get to completely where you're trying to go, but that all this work matters. And if you can bring people along, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, Amber? My word for 2019 is alignment, around this idea of how many people are doing good things in different places, and if we could figure out the ways to do it together, we would align, we could leverage things, we could go faster, we could go further. And so how do you find the ways to do that, even, you know, incrementally at first, but you can, this is movement that we're doing. And so how do you stay positive and connected and feel progress? Like, it's important to be able to keep doing the work. So good job for signing up and, you know, taking this on in your free time.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I want to send a shout out to Lisa. This is a phenomenal thing you've created here.
Yeah.
Seriously, like creating I truly did not know what to expect coming in here, right? We're like, all right, we're going to get attacked. How's this going to play out? The openness.
You signed up for
Everybody's scared, like trying to see what's going to happen. But just the openness of the conversations and the transparency of the folks here, and you helped create that, right? So I get to go back to my space and say, look, help's on the way. The folks are actually thinking and having a conversation, right? Because you feel lonely out here in this world, right? There's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of different opinions. We hear about it from a national level all the way down to, you know, the communities that we serve. And to know that there's, you know, like-minded thoughts and ideas, and that you guys are really passionate about serving in some sort of way and helping to bring about change is incredible. And so again, shout out to you, Lisa, for pulling this together, and I think you're going to have a lot of success in the future with this.
Thank you, and thank you again to our guests for coming in. I know a couple of people have been like, can we have a group photo? So they clearly love you all. So before our guests leave, let's do a group photo with everyone, and then our class will stay here and we'll say thank you and all to our. All right. I know this isn't not the most exciting part as we talk about logistics, but let's cover some quick logistics. And
and then we'll get some time to reflect on your rounds too. So,
Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much.
I know Nicole always emails this out to you all too, but just, so logistics, our next session is our check-in, our midway check-in point. And so this is in your journal, everything you've had forever, it's the date and the time. The location had been set as the Oakley Library. We set all of that, like dates, locations, all of that before any of you had applied. Once we did not think we were at 24 of you this year. And we have realized we will not fit in that space in the Oakley Library. Yeah, exactly. So thank you for being amazing and us having 24 of you this year. But Nicole is working out an alternate location, and we'll send that out as soon as possible. We're thinking it's going to be at the Urban League. We're just trying to, there's just transition in there, leadership, all that stuff. So we're just trying to look it out. So we will get back to you on that. I know we always say make sure you do your pre-work, but this time the pre-work really is about the reflection questions in your journal. So just take the time for this. This is a session we did not have last year in our first class, folks, in the focus group we did on what worked well, what should we have in our curriculum. Melise and Kareem, this is the danger I'll have if you give us feedback. They were the loudest advocates for this, so they're facilitating it. Of a time, like, let's just stop partway through and just think. Yes. Right? Just give us a time to center ourselves on everything we've learned, kind of marinate on it. What does that mean for the next couple of months ahead of us? Where do we want to get? Are we on our path to get there, etc.? So Kareem and Melise will be facilitating that session for us. So just make sure you have put the thought into the pre-work questions because they're going to jump right off from there. And then the next session after that is our policy session. So I was like, to Ben, I think that's Ben's stuff. I should drop it off at his house.
Wouldn't make it far. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
So the policy one, we're back here again. So how this one will go is Dan Lauder is an attorney who focuses on school board work. And so he's going to come in and do first an overview of, from a legal perspective, we're talking about law, like what is owned by the federal, state, and local level. So he'll kind of set that stage for us. And then we'll do a panel like this, and then the three groups again, so similar. So Jared Cameras, lots of you probably know, he runs lots of campaigns in town. So very, very schooled in all of this kind of political work. He'll be our moderator. Our local policymakers are Melanie Bates, who's been on the CPS board forever. Before that, she was on the state school board. So she has a really interesting perspective of both of those. And Chris Steelbach, who is a city councilman. So we wanted to get both of those local governing bodies' perspectives. For the state level, Jenny Kilgore is the state school board member from our district. So she's coming. And Eric Kearney, who was a former state senator. And as some of you know, he's now the CEO of the Cincinnati African American Chamber. So he's going to come. They'll talk about at the state level how policy is made. And then at the national level, we have Mia, who worked in the Obama Department of Ed and White House staff on education issues. So she'll talk about the federal perspective. She is currently the interim executive director at Teach for America. So while Ben is on leave, she is doing that role. But she, this is a great perspective she has. And then David Mann, as you all know, he's a Cincinnati City Councilman, but he was a U.S. representative.
Yes.
So he's going to be able to talk about that perspective of how policy is made up there. So that's going to be pretty awesome. So that's what we have going on for our policy session. And then we go to the policy committee. So just like we did student achievement, we'll go to our policy committee meeting, and that's the date of that. Again, I will, even if the meeting ends up going long, we will still, just like last time, all of us who were at student achievement committee were like, this meeting is still going, we're supposed to be debriefing. But we still ended our debrief on time because we always try to, whatever time we said, y'all are going to be done, try to get you out at that time. So those are our next few sessions. And then the last thing is that Nicole and I wanted to give you a reminder that for your group projects, remember your proposals are due on Monday. So if we remember back to what, you have this in your binder. If group is not going to be ready by Monday, just let us know. We'll figure it out with you. But this is the pivot point, right? Where we wanted you guys to have spent the first, month or two or so kind of just thinking about what your issue is, doing some research, figuring out what direction you wanted to go. And then before you go that direction, we want to see what your direction is, what you think you might want to do. So this is all in your binders, and so just, we're looking forward to seeing those, and we'll review them and chat with you all, and you'll be off and running on the second part, which is the go do something part. It's pretty fun. So that's logistics, group projects. Questions about what we're doing in November? Those are all November sessions. Yes?
Not necessarily a question, but a few weeks ago, I met Dan Lautner.
Oh!
The law firm that he works for,
Yeah.
was in Columbus, and they had a statewide thing about updates, policy
Okay.
updates for everybody to go to, and it was open, so I went. And it was a full day of strictly lawyers talking of all the different things that boards need to be aware of, and superintendents and things like that, and all the policy changes, law-wise, and that you need to go ahead and implement and things like that. And so I'll post a copy of the itinerary in Slack, and if any of the sessions you're interested in, let me know. I'll copy the handouts that they have, because they varied for each section, and just go ahead and email it to you. They had everything from just about school board policy in general, student discipline, IEPs and 504 plans, social media, and a whole bunch of other things. It was about like 12 different topics or so. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to send you your survey link in a minute. So we're going to take the next couple minutes for you guys just on your own have some time to reflect. So you can open those journals up. There are lots of questions there. The other thing I would encourage you to do too after this one is look back at all those handouts you guys got at the systems change session. So things like the systems iceberg, the mental models. Like, where did you see mental models happening today that might have led to people's whys or hows? Like, were any of your mental models challenged today by something you heard? So tie back to what we just learned in systems change. So when you're taking your time to reflect today, let's think about it in that systems change kind of way. So we'll take some time to do that and to do your surveys, but then don't leave, because we're going to spend the last like 15, 20 minutes of our day in your fundraising groups, so that we can kind of just close out that conversation of where is your group, do they feel like they're on the right track. So let's take some quiet time. I'll send out your survey link and just take some time to reflect.